If you look for it, every day has cause for celebration. Celebrate a friend for their promotion, baby wedding, life thing. Celebrate yourself for keeping the couch warm. It's no easy feat, especially if it's a big couch. Or maybe you just want to celebrate living in 2023, where you can get beer, wine, and spirits delivered from Drizzly in under 60 minutes without leaving said couch. So download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com and get your favorite drinks delivered today.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 85 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Digital Federal Credit Union, better known by all of us by now. Come on, they're DCU. And since their beginnings as a credit union for the employees of Digital Equipment Corporation back in 1979, DCU has never lost sight of its roots of being a not-for-profit financial cooperative owned by and operated by and for their members. And a lot of things can change in 40 years, but some things remain constant, like DCU's unwavering commitment to provide exceptional service and to make a positive impact in the communities where their members live and work. And no matter what their members' unique goals are, they are committed to helping them the only way they know how, the DCU way. And that consists of 3 simple philosophies that guide each and every DCU team member. People come first, do the right thing, and make a difference. You can find out more of exactly what I'm talking about at DCU.org. And I know this. Giving back is central to what DCU does because I've been working with them for nearly 2 decades. I also want to put a plug in for the Mistress Carrie Backstage Pass on Patreon. Backstage Pass holders get access to everything from exclusive ticket giveaways to travel blogs, private photos. We do an exclusive live stream every month. They get early access to event tickets. They can submit podcast questions and so much more. Just head to patreon.com/Mistress Carrie or click the Patreon button at mistresscarrie.com. And I want to give a quick shout out to Backstage Pass holders Larkin, Sharon, Jeff, Eric, Tom, Mark, Kathy, Julie, Paula, and Carol. You guys rock. Okay, this week's episode is very special to me because I've been friends with Paul Logus for over 2 decades. Paul Logus is a mixing engineer, he's a producer, he's a mastering engineer, he's a musician, and well, he's just an overall music expert. And he's worked on songs and albums that you've definitely got in your collection. And the list of artists that he's worked with is pretty varied. Everyone from Tina Turner and Notorious B.I.G. and Puff Daddy to Pantera and Pop Evil and Ra. He's even worked with Simply Red, Corey Taylor, Anthrax, Steel Panther, Clutch, Public Enemy, and so many more. And Paul and I sat down and got reconnected, and boy, did we talk about music. Music fans, this one's for you. Allow me to introduce you to Paul Logus.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mrs. Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Mr. Logus!
Mistress Carrie.
You're officially on the record now, my friend.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to be doing this. This is so cool.
You are the second producer that I've had on the show. And I find what it is that you do fascinating, and I know that rock fans do too. So I'm glad that you accepted my invitation.
Oh, gosh. Why wouldn't I?
Do you remember when we met exactly? Did we meet in New York with the Puffy thing? Is that when we met?
We met at when I was putting a rehearsal thing together for a concert that we were doing we were doing tryouts, and I was going through people to figure out who was going to be in the band for our show that was going to be at Giant Stadium.
Yeah, it was at Giant Stadium. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we met there, and we were trying out. I kind of knew who I was going to have pretty much, but so you were there. I won't tell the whole story, but
no, you can tell the story, because I haven't told the story before.
So I was already slated to. I was already in the producing Raw, and we wanted to try Sean for this thing and see, and Sahaj wanted to see how Sean would work live on this thing. But this was like gigantic. I mean, there was, there's thousands and thousands of people at this thing. And what we did was I put a band together to play some Bad Boy stuff that was a rock oriented thing, like maybe one or two songs. I can't remember what we played.
Oh, I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was Puffy playing was it the Hot 100 or what's the big top 40 station in New York? And
Hot 97.
Yeah, Hot 97. And they had their massive stadium show. And Puffy wanted to play the song off the Godzilla soundtrack that had the Led Zeppelin riff in it, and he needed a rock band to do it.
Right. So
the Kashmir song that he did.
It was called "Come With Me."
Yes, exactly.
That's what that was.
Yeah.
Right. So that the year prior to that. So I was the music director on that show that you're talking about, but I was also the music director the previous year. But I was in the band, and I put the band together, and I played with Jimmy Page and Slash at Giant Stadium. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Okay, so
I didn't meet you that year. I got invited the next year.
It was that was the following year. So I put that together for Puffy, and as a music director. But but the second year when you were there, I didn't play, and that's also when I met Rob Caggiano, because I forget, there was a person at Bad Boy who was saying, okay, we want to try some of these people out. So they threw some people in, I threw some people in, and we had a day of tryouts with stuff. But I was like, yeah, I want Rob. I want Rob Caggiano.
Yeah, who, by the way, was in Anthrax and now is the guitar player in Volbeat. I had him on the show.
Correct. Yeah.
And he was singing your praises, by the way.
He's a very good friend of mine, and we got to do a one of your War Room things with him or something.
Hell yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, so then Rob is there. Will Pendarvis was there. Will was the one who you probably don't know Will, do you?
I know the name, but I don't think I know him.
So he was a DJ on K-Rock in New York, and he was the one who got me connected up with. I think he was the one that got me connected up with Sahaj somehow. That's a whole other story. But so anyways, so we met at the tryouts for the Puffy show for Giant Stadium.
Yeah, because the Sean you're talking about is Sean Cochran, who is from New England, been a longtime friend of mine and a local musician for a long time. And he was auditioning to be the bass player of Ra, and you needed a bass player for this Puffy thing. So he was like, I'm going down to audition for Ra and maybe this Puffy thing or whatever. Do you want to go? And so we went on a road trip to New York together. And I go in, and there's like Puffy and Rob Caggiano. I knew even before Anthrax, because he was in this band called Boiler Room, I think, in the 90s.
Yep.
And my old radio station, WAF, used to play him. So I met him back then and was like, "What are you doing here?" And he was like, "What are you doing here?" And then I got introduced to you, and they were like, "Do you know who that tall guy is over there? That's Paul Logus. He's a big deal. He's a record. He's famous." I was like, "What?" And so then Sean became the bass player of Ra, and he got into the band for the Puffy thing. I don't want to skip over this because Sean gets the bass playing gig. Sahaj, Rob Caggiano, Sean, Puffy wanted a rock band. So they outfit all of us in Sean John attire to go to the show because Puffy wanted his whole band in his signature clothing line. And there I am standing on the side of the stage wearing Sean John clothes, watching one of my oldest friends, Sean Cochran, play bass on stage for Puffy. And I'm standing next to fucking Busta Rhymes. And I was like, how did I get here?
Sean Cochran.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And then, of course, you know that Sean and I are very good friends.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've always stayed in touch. And we've been able to drag you out of New York City a few times to get you to come to New England and go on motorcycle rides with us and stuff. And so I've known you for the better part of 20 years now?
Yeah. Yep.
Which is crazy.
It is crazy. And I want to say, actually, I have to say this right now since we've sort of breezed past the Ra thing, but I want to thank you for Ra.
Oh, thank you.
Because I don't think your fans may or may not know that you would not know who Ra is if it wasn't for Mistress Carrie.
Well, Sahaj has been very gracious, not only in the liner notes to the albums and stuff, but on the band's bio on their website and when the band plays live, especially in the New England area, about giving me credit for kind of being involved with their career. And so that's really sweet. I mean,
well, you blew the band up. I mean, the reason why the thing happened so quickly with the band was that you played it, and then there was such a groundswell that happened immediately, and we were talking about shopping the band and doing different things and whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like boom, like this got whipped up like nothing because the thing was spinning and reacting really hard. And they were selling records.
Well, we might as well give the explanation kind of how all this happened since we're talking about it already. So Ben Carroll, the guitar player from Ra, is from this area and was in a band with a guy named Jimmy Garrity Kid, who's probably listening to this. So what's up, Jimbo?
Gimme Jarity.
And Ben got into Ra with Sahaj and gave the demo of the band to Jimmy, his friend, and was like, "Hey, check this out." And Jimmy loved it. And at the time, I was on the air at WAF, and WAF had a reputation as being this career-making, flame-throwing, influential rock station that helped the likes of, Godsmack and Stained and was
but
really...
you did other things before Ra. You did some substantial stuff for other bands before Ra.
Well, there was at that point, in the mid 90s and late 90s, especially once I started getting on the air in 98, there were bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit and Disturbed and Linkin Park and Deftones and Tool, not taking credit for their success, but there were a handful of rock stations that if you could get on those stations and get those stations to play you, it near guaranteed that your band would take off nationwide. And I'm not taking the credit for AAF's influence, but AAF over the 50 years it was on the air had really earned the reputation as being a station that was willing to take chances on artists, that was willing to put their neck out, that had an audience that was rabid and loyal, that was willing to wrap their arms around these bands that they had never heard of and took pride in saying, yeah, you know what, that band is ours because we heard them first. And so, Jimmy brought me the Ra demo and I really, really liked it. And so I brought it to the radio station and brought it to my boss and was like, you know, look, one of the other DJs, Rocco, was the one that kind of found the demo of an unsigned Godsmack and kind of was the one that did what I did for Raw with Godsmack. And I was like, I want to try and launch this band. Like, let me start playing it on my show and see what happens. And so it took off and the groundswell started. And that is what you're talking about, that it helped the record deal. It was
also something else happened, which I don't have the facts on, but that caused a huge fire in Boston. And then somewhere else in the country, in the Midwest, maybe Chicago or whatever, after it blew up there, it blew up on another station. They found out about it because of you guys. And then it just started this chain reaction thing across the country, but it sold thousands of records before the From One came out. It sold, he had another deal with somebody and it sold, that's what was getting sold out of, what was it? The comic book place?
Newbury Comics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing happened with Godsmack. They sold 25,000 albums like out of Newbury Comics in the trunks of their car. And SoundScan, for, you know, anybody that knows the word or whatever, is how they track album sales and where the album charts come from. And so when you start seeing an album on the SoundScan charts in a city and it's not a national release and labels see that it's an independent release, they start digging around going, who is this band? What is going on? And that's kind of what happened with Godsmack. It happened with Ride. It happens when there's a city that has a loyal enough audience and a radio station that's willing to take chances. These kinds of things are possible, especially in rock.
Yeah, and that's where things were going with Universal at that time, you know, not just rock, but they became statisticians, so to speak, and they were just looking at whatever, like, you know, that's how you got signed, was what you just described.
Yeah, is to get somebody in your town at the radio station to believe in you and to be able to light a little bit of a fire. And smart labels like Universal at that time,
yeah.
You know, the way that labels now kind of, I mean, that's how Justin Bieber got signed off of YouTube. It's like they look for these little, you know, things on a graph, and it's all of a sudden this blip, and they go, oh, wait a minute, what is that? And that was kind of how you went viral before viral was a thing, is that you did it by the radio stations in your town.
Yeah, and it was, I think that the lasting effects from that are much different than what's going on with today's instantaneous stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know that you have a long career in rock and roll, and it comes up all the time on the show. It's really hard for another genre of music and artists to have longevity of career and loyalty from artists that rock has. Country's really the only other one. With pop and all of that other stuff, it's like you come and go with the tides. But rock, if you have one hit song, if you have one great record and you get fans from that and you treat your fans right, they're loyal with you forever.
Yeah, I think there's other genres where that's true as well.
You think?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the power of the song.
Right.
You know, there's stuff that you could have like one super hit song and then you can live off of it for the rest of your life.
Seriously. Yeah.
You know, we were talking about Bad Boy. Well, the song, you know, Bad Boys from the movie.
Yeah.
That was written by Inner Circle, which is a band that's still exists. It's, you know, they're older now, but they're in Florida. They have a studio called Circle House, and they've been living off of that. That's how they built the studio and the whole thing, you know, and that's just gone on and on and on. There's other, you know, that's not a rock band. They're rock. You know.
No, but I mean that these rock bands can still go and tour and sell merch and still have this active career. It's like being a legacy artist in rock and roll, who was I talking to that said, do you really think Mick Jagger thought all these years later that he'd still be able to tour? They had the biggest tour of 2021. They made $115 million touring during the middle of a pandemic. It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. The thing that's, well, we'll continue.
So that was
no. I'm thinking about the touring and whatnot. So the lockdown just kind of turned everything upside down for everybody.
Yeah.
That was this album sales aren't what they used to be, and some of the bands that I work with are earning probably more of a living off of touring than they are with album sales. Like you were talking about, was it Godsmack sold 25,000 records
as
at Newberry
as an unsigned band,
as an unsigned
band, local band,
and signed bands now are having a hard time selling 20,000 records now
because of streaming and downloading and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, it's crazy.
Did you see the vinyl album sales for the week before Christmas?
Did I what?
Did you see the vinyl album sales that for the week before Christmas?
No.
They sold over 2 million albums, vinyl records. It's the highest album sales since 1991. In one week. In 1 week. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, that brings up another interesting thing with vinyl production is incredibly slow right now.
Yeah. Well, I heard there's a vinyl shortage because of vinyl flooring, because I heard this from a guy that owns a record store. He said that vinyl, the actual material, is in short supply because so many people were doing home renovations during the lockdown and they were putting in vinyl floors. And so production of vinyl flooring went up and vinyl is in short supply. Never mind that there's only like 3 operating vinyl record pressing plants in the United States.
That's not true.
It's not?
No.
Wait, what part of it's not true? That the vinyl's in shortage or the printing places are in shortage?
They can just melt combs. We always joke about that with if you get a pressing back from one of these plants that I don't like, I'm like, what the hell are these guys using? Combs? This is crap. Like it's noisy and whatever. I'm a mastering engineer now. You know that.
I know, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because when I talk to bands and they talk about the recording process, and there's been a lot of conversation. I talked to Miles Kennedy about it, about bands going back to the old school way of recording all in the room live at the same time.
That's a good idea.
And using Pro Tools to erase all the imperfections in rock and roll that need to be there, and that it can just pasteurize it. But when mastering comes up, I don't even understand what the hell you do, Mr. Logus. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because as a music fan, right, we're the end user. We get the music. We understand the concept that they go in the recording studio, but we don't really know what they're doing in there. And like I said, you're the second producer that I had on the show. I had Toby Wright on, and he was talking about recording Alice in Chains and recording Korn and recording the Seven Dust record that he recorded here at Longview Farm Studios, which is when I met him. And when even Rob Caggiano went into this whole thing because he was singing your praises about being a, quote, brilliant mastering engineer.
I love Rob.
About how you have to treat the music files differently based on if they're going to be made into files for streaming or whether they're going to get pressed onto vinyl. Is that true?
Yeah. I'll try to make it simple.
Dumb it down for me.
What?
Dumb it down for me.
Okay. The thing, there's times when we're talking and the thing, it cuts you out if I'm talking.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No. I'm sorry for anyway. So the mastering is one way to look at it is format optimization. It can be a lot of things, but it started off being a thing where you were when there was just vinyl, you were a transfer engineer, and you would get tapes, and you would EQ them and do stuff to make it workable so that you could cut it onto a lacquer. The lacquers get turned into stampers, and that stampers make the records at the plants, with melted combs. Just kidding about the combs part. So there was a guy named Lee Hulko who owned this company called Sterling. He created Sterling, and I'm improvising here a little bit, but he pretty much, as I understand it, coined the term mastering to make it a little more flashy. And now it's just it's evolved into other things. So now you go, you're making a CD. You're doing the final bit of organization of a record. It's putting it all together, making sure everything sounds good. You're getting all the titles right. You're putting all the codes together, making sure that that's how you get paid, the ISRC codes and all that stuff. And so the format for digital and CDs is relatively similar, but format for vinyls is completely different. And it needs, in my opinion, it needs more dynamic range, and it has to be EQ'd differently to make it cuttable for lacquers. And so that's where you have a format optimization for vinyl or for CD. CDs are, people are just like cranking the stuff and making it as loud as humanly possible.
When I talked to Toby Wright, I've talked to him a couple times because he has this sound healing company called Tomes. And so I had him on the show to talk about that, and we talked a lot about frequency. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about the difference in frequency range on a digital format? So if you're going to put a song on a CD or a song on Spotify versus the signal range that's available on an actual vinyl record. You can hear more on the vinyl, right? More range of frequency. Tell me explain this to me. Why do vinyl records sound better then? I'll pose the question that way. Why do they always sound better? That
is debatable, that it would sound better.
What's your opinion? You're the expert in the room.
People say that to me, and I say, if you want, when I master it for vinyl, the levels are much, much lower than CD, and if you do it right, it'll sound. I'll get a test pressing back, and I'll put the thing on the platter, and I'll cue up the digital master, and I'll dial in all the settings, and I'll just hit play on one and hit play on the other, and I'll A/B, and it sounds perfect. And they're like, and then people's like, vinyl sounds so good. It's like, yeah, it's because it's not clipped to death. It's not crushed. I said, if you guys want to put out your record from the vinyl masters, it'll sound really good. It's just not going to be really loud like you're used to with the CD stuff. And people are they're so in love with this thing. It's like what you're in love with is you're in love with not hearing massive distortion and clipping and more dynamic range, which is what you get with the vinyl. All the records that I grew up listening to, I'm an old man, Carrie. They have like 14, 10, dB of dynamic range, and the CDs. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I mean, it's like 5 dB, 6 dB maybe, if you're lucky, of dynamic range. It's just crushed to death, and that's a sound, and that's cool. But it's so. If you want it to sound like vinyl without the vinyl, the level's got to drop.
On the production end, obviously, not on the end user.
On the mastering end, you just don't make it. You just don't make it so blazing hot, and then it'll sound really good. And actually, what's funny is that when CDs first came out, there was such a rush to put CDs out that they they pressed, I think, they pressed vinyl cutting copies onto CDs initially. So the original CDs, I don't know if you remember, they're very low volume.
I'll have to go back. I still have the first CD I ever got. It's Skid Row's Slave to the Grind. Was the first CD that I ever got because I was still getting music either on vinyl to listen to at home, or if I wanted to be able to take it with me in the car or whatever, it was on cassette.
Mm-hmm.
Which never sounded good.
Cassette?
Yeah. Yeah, they sound like shit.
I don't know about that.
Really? Because bands are starting to press them again, and I'm like, why?
You want to try something interesting is get one of your iPods. No one has an iPod anymore, but if you had, I did a thing literally where I had an iPod, and I plugged it into a really nice stereo system I've got at home, and then I queued up what the heck did I do? And then I queued up a cassette, and the cassette sounded so freaking amazing. I can't believe it.
Really?
I was like, oh my God. I missed it. It just sounded incredible.
I've been joking that with bands, like I talked to Lee Kakati from Pop Evil, and he told me that, the record was coming out on a cassette.
Yeah.
And I've been joking. No band has taken me up on this, but you'll laugh because you'll know it's true. If a band is going to release an album on cassette nowadays, it should come with a band logoed pencil.
Yeah. Right, to fix it.
Yes! See, you get it. Nobody's taken advantage of my brilliant marketing idea yet.
I think it's amazing.
Never used a cassette before, you better have a fucking pencil around because at one point or another, you're going to need it.
Or a Bic pen.
Yes. Yes.
Even better.
100% a big pen. Yes.
Yeah, that the cap, the little blue cap will lock it right in there.
Well, I want to go back to the beginning because you've had a fascinating career, and to talk about how you got where you are, we got to start at the beginning. So, where are you from originally?
I'm from Dayton, Ohio. Originally,
which is why you don't have that obnoxious New York accent.
Why, thank you. No, it's just that's where I'm from. No accents over there, none.
When you were growing up,
it's a joke.
I have this music theory. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's two phases of your music life. There's the early phase of your music life where you get exposed to whatever the people in your life are listening to. So your parents, your older brother, the cool uncle, your neighbors across the street that had older brothers and sisters. And then there's a line in the sand one day where you discover something on your own and you claim it as yours. So the first part of the question, what was the soundtrack of your childhood? What was the music you were exposed to growing up that you remember listening to?
Well, Beatles.
Yeah.
Beatles and the funny thing is so Beatles, I remember Beatles back from when I was 5 and being in California in 1968 and having a babysitter come over and play Beatles records. And I was like, I want Beatles. And that's, I mean.
And in 68,
my whole life.
That was like, you're getting exposed to like the drug era of the Beatles, not the innocent, she loves you, yeah, Beatles. So that's mind melting stuff. I remember listening to the White Album when I was like 5 going, this is so cool.
Well, I mean, I didn't know. I wasn't listening to that stuff. They were playing like what the heck was the Red record? It was I can't remember, Carrie. But the first Beatles record was Meet the Beatles, and that people were playing that stuff in 68. I mean, it was a mad Beatle madness back then.
Yeah.
And so they weren't necessarily playing the newest record or something, but they'd already had whatever record it was for a couple of years and playing it over and over again. And I was exposed to all that stuff. And then I was exposed to movie soundtracks and movies, and I loved all of that stuff. 2001.
Ooh. You know what I still have on vinyl from my childhood, which explains a lot about how I ended up like this? I have Mike.
When am I doing your interview? I'm gonna do your interview.
I have Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells on vinyl.
I have that.
Do you?
Tubular Bells.
Now you get like a snippet.
I'm thinking of the Tube. Sorry.
No, Tubular Bells, like The Exorcist. Dun, 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 dun.
Okay.
And like it's a whole album's worth of brilliant music, but The Exorcist took like that one little snippet and made it the scariest song on the planet. But when your kid is in elementary school sitting around on their record player listening to The Exorcist, basically, you should know that's some foreshadowing for this.
Okay.
So
that's interesting.
When you're a kid, that music, like I grew up with the Beatles, kind of, that's the gift my mom gave me, was the love of music and the Beatles as like the soundtrack of my childhood.
I mean, there's so many things that are the soundtrack of my childhood. I don't even know where to start. You should have told me this in advance.
No.
So I could study.
No, you're not getting.
Because I just don't remember anything.
Prep.
Huh?
You don't get to prep. I'm not going to submit because this isn't a presidential debate. I'm not submitting my questions ahead of time. You're showing me crib notes on a note card. Like I'm going to let you prepare for my questions.
Oh God.
All right. So if you got handed that kind of stuff, like what did your parents listen to growing up? What was on the radio?
My mother, well, first of all, my mother was a music teacher. You want to know what made me is both of my parents, my mother being a music teacher and my father was an electrical engineer and he worked for Wright-Patterson. That's it.
That's it. Mic drop. There you go. That's
okay. Well, thanks, Carrie. We're done early. What am I going to do now for the rest of the night?
That makes so much sense. Like you got the best of both worlds. You got the artistic side, but you also got the science side of it. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I was, that made me for a confused young me for quite a while. Cause I really knew what I wanted to do and it didn't exist in school.
Yeah.
So I just kind of went along with the school thing just to make everybody happy. You know what I mean?
There's a lot of people in the music business that kind of just went along with it because, I mean, I grew up in my family's Sicilian bakery and it was like, go to college or work in the bakery. And I was like, okay, guess I'm going to college. Because I don't want to make bread.
I was just going to ask you, did you do, every year I know that you do your massive cooking thing.
Oh, I did it. Lasagnas, anise cookies, all of it. Ridiculous.
Crazy cookies and all kinds of stuff.
It was delicious.
And so, okay.
That's where it comes from.
And so it took you some time. Have you just recovered from it now?
I'm still kind of, I'm going to de-Christmas. I have a rule about Christmas, not to go off on a tangent, but it's got to be gone by New Year's Day. I need to start the new year with Christmas like wiped off the planet.
Gone.
So I'm in the middle of like taking down the tree and dealing with the needles and like finishing up all the dishes from the copious amounts of lasagna and anise cookies. And so by the weekend, it'll be good.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you were growing up with a mom as a music teacher, was it just expected or forced that you were going to be a musician in some way? Piano lessons? No. Anything? No?
No, I was completely blown away. Music was, I loved it from the minute I knew about it.
Yeah.
I would hear stuff on the radio and like I would hear the Beatles on a radio, like a mono radio. And I was like, what is that? Like how are they doing that? I wanted to know what that was from when I was, 8 or 7. It was crazy. I mean, I was just it was like a drug for me. I just couldn't get enough of it. I still can't get enough of it.
It is funny because I know people in my life that are not music heads the way that you and I are. It's like there are people that live and die by music. And then there are people that are just these passive music fans that are like, oh yeah, I guess I like that song. I don't understand people like that.
Right. Well, that's why I don't get along with people that don't like music.
Yeah, it's hard to relate.
Yeah.
Like, I have all of my memories of my life associated with what I was listening to at the time.
Right. Right. So, I used to do this thing where, I would buy movie soundtracks. I have a lot of movie soundtracks because, when I was a kid, you don't have there was no Netflix, there was no computers, there was no nothing. And if you wanted to if you saw this amazing movie and you wanted to relive it again, like Rollerball was a big one for me. I loved Rollerball, and I loved the soundtrack of it.
Right.
And so I kind of gravitated towards movies that had really kick-ass soundtracks to them, even the James Bond ones were amazing, and the thing I would do is, you'd go see a movie once and then that was it for maybe 20 years. You would never see the movie again, or maybe it would show up on television or something. But the way that I could relive the movies, I would have this movie soundtrack and I could play it, and it became a thing that would happen in my head, and I could just relive it that way.
I saw that movie Don't Look Up recently that's on Netflix that's got Meryl Streep and Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence. Mm-hmm. And for days after seeing that movie, I could not stop singing the Four Tops Bernadette because it was on the soundtrack and it was in the film. And I am such a huge fan. Like, I grew up listening to the Beatles from Mom, but my dad had this love affair with music that had horns in it. So everything from James Brown and all the Motown stuff to like Three Dog Night and Chicago, like all of that kind of stuff. My dad just loved music that had like horns in it. I love the Four Tops. And literally for days after I saw Don't Look Up, I was just yelling, Bernadette! Like, I couldn't stop singing the freaking song. And it sticks with you. Music that's placed properly in a film, like, it does something to you.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I was going to say, you're not going to know who this guy is, but I think Richard Factor's in that movie.
Richard Factor?
Do you know who that is?
No.
He is, let's see. Does anybody out there know who Richard Factor is? No.
Richard Factor. Is this a dick joke?
No. No. This is Richard Factor is the inventor of Eventide Clockworks.
He's in the movie?
He might be, but see Richard Factor invented the company still exists today. If you're your other producer friend would know who Richard Factor is.
All right, I'll have to ask Toby.
Toby will know who Richard Factor is. Okay. He better know, or else he will get docked points. So Richard Factor he's a total geek, and I've met him before, and everything has to be perfect. He walks down the hallway in his building, back then when I met him, like in a straight line, and he would make a sharp right turn, and he always had to be on the right side of the hallway, and it was just crazy. He was showing me around the company. Anyway, so the thing he invented was involved filters and delay lines and all kinds of crazy stuff. So like a phase shifter. Do you know what a phase shifter is?
No.
Do you know what a flanger is?
Kind of. I'm a radio DJ. We don't get to be smart like this.
No. This is so, in the song Kashmir.
Yeah.
Right? That when he goes, when the cymbals do that thing.
Yeah.
That's a phase shifter.
Oh, okay. Right. I told you, dumb it down for me, Paul. Give me an example and I understand.
I don't know what people know and what they don't know, and I'm pretty stupid with many things. So, anyway, so Rich. So this is it. This is getting to the good part for why he would be and why it would be funny if he was in there. So, Richard Factor started a company called SETI, SETI, or a derivative of it. and what his company was doing was looking for intelligent life out in
I know
outer
what
space.
SETI is.
I don't know. If you know what SETI is, you should know who Richard Factor is.
So I
do.
looked up his bio on the NAMM website, which is like the music trade show thing. It says he's the founder of Eventide and invented and designed numerous innovative products over the last 50 years, playing with synthesizers and theremins when he was young and developed a passion for electronics. He attended Cornell and received degrees in economics and then started the Eventide company.
I have a question before you go any further.
Yeah.
I thought we weren't going to do computers and stuff.
No, I get to. I'm the host.
What is this? What is this thing?
This is shit. He showed off the instant phaser.
Yeah.
And then adventured into the aviation business when he designed the moving map system, a tool used by pilots to see the map move with them as they opposed to remaining static. Eventide celebrated its 50th anniversary in 2021.
Yeah. So how funny, like the guy that looks like an old Richard Factor is who I think that was standing in the White House in the Oval Office. And I was like, oh my God, that's Richard Factor. It's probably not, but I looked on the credits and he's not listed. So maybe it's not him.
That's funny.
But so to me, that movie, the two funniest things is that here's Leonardo DiCaprio, did the Titanic, and then it's the good ship Earth Titanic.
Yeah.
And that him and Richard Factor is like, oh well, there he is. All that hard work, Richard, finally paid off.
Yeah, you get to be in a Leonardo DiCaprio movie.
No, paid off that he, a body, a celestial body, the thing that he was looking for. I'm sorry, was celestial bodies and all that stuff.
Right.
Crazy stuff. But and then another thing is that he's a ham. You know what a ham is, right?
No.
Ham operator.
Oh,
amateur
ham
radio.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's my part of my brethren.
So you're a ham operator guy too?
I am. I have my general license.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's like the middle one. The extra one is, you have to be really smart for that one. I'm not that smart.
So when you were growing up with this love of music and the Beatles, you get to those adolescent ages, right? The 11, 12, 13 years old. Was there a new band or an artist or a song that just made, in rock and roll specifically, that you were just like, oh yeah, that's it. That's what I want to do.
I wanted to do this since I was 5. It's
so crazy that you can be that young and kind of have that idea and be so clear.
But yeah, it is crazy. But, it took me a long time to figure out what it was, but I knew I wanted to do something with this because I'll tell you the other thing that happened is that my grandfather, he had a shop and would sell all kinds of appliances and whatever. And he brought tape machines home. And I was like, oh, tape machine. And so he did this incredible thing where, he was an older guy for being, married to my grandmother and he passed early in my life. But what he did was he made recordings so that we would, when my brother and I got old enough, we could listen to him and get to know him. It's cool, right?
It's really cool. Do you still have them?
Of course. Wow. And I still have the machine. And anyway, so that was another defining moment in my childhood that got me into what I'm doing now.
When I was a kid, my parents bought me one of those little cassette recorders that had the little handle, and it had the little cheap plastic microphone you could plug into the little aux plug on the side. And I used to go around and interview people. And that's what I did when I was a little kid. And I used to get in trouble because I would hook up the tape recorder and I would tape the microphone like into the house plants because I wanted to know what my parents and their friends talked about when they kicked the kids out of the room.
You should go into politics.
But like
there was a guy that did that, you know.
Yes, I'm very well aware.
Okay.
But I think it's funny that all those years ago that I had a tape recorder as a toy and that I used to sit down and interview people, and I was 5, 6, 7 years old. So I think it's funny that there are these hints of what it is that you are going to become when you're a kid that some people would just overlook as like, oh, isn't that cute? She talks into a little microphone, fast forward however many years later, and now she's on the radio or, you know.
Yeah. It's crazy stuff.
It's funny that you develop that stuff so young.
Well, the other thing that happened is that not only did he do that for him to, you know, for his grandchildren is he got my parents and them another set of recorders, which were these, God, how many did we get? I think he bought like 2 or 3 of them. And so when our family got split up for a little while, my dad was on a trip, and so part of the time, you know, we were communicating with these tape recorders because the phone bills were too high. If you can think about how
you used to get charged extra money to make long distance phone calls, and so the idea of calling someone in another state or heaven forbid another country, it would be so expensive you wouldn't do it.
No. But so the thing is because of that, I have these tapes that we made that we would record this stuff and we would send it to my parents or to my grandparents or whatever. And we would, you know, my mom would just sit there and talk and blah, 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 blah. And then I have some of these things too.
That is
really
so cool. Yeah, because I mean, nowadays with a smartphone, right, you're constantly taking little videos, you know, around the holidays. There's grandma, whatever. But back, that was not a common thing to have recordings of your parents or your grandparents' voices. And
no.
So to have that now, I mean, that's so cool.
Yeah. And then I started taking those things apart too. And then really taking them apart and then making other things out of them, and then I was making my own effects, let's say, because I heard people talking about tape machines being used for echoes and to make echoes and that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, what the hell did they do to do that? And there was no internet to figure out how you would do that. So I had 2 of these machines and I took them apart and I'm like, oh, I'll put this thing here and desoldered this thing and I'll solder it onto this other thing, and then whammo, I was, you know, put a potentiometer on it, and then it's echoing, you know, and I was just doing all this crazy stuff, and I love taking stuff apart and making other things.
I wish that I had some of those old cassettes of like me interviewing the dog when I was like 5. I would love to have them. That I have my original like radio demo. First of all, I sound like one of the chipmunks because my voice is like 3 octaves higher than it is now. It's so ridiculous. But I listen to it and I'm like, oh my God, I sound like a child. It's so funny when you go back and listen to that old stuff. You're just like, oh my God, is this really my life or is this a joke?
Nah, well, you could get one of you could get an Eventide 949. You could repitch it. You could change the pitch on it, and then, you know, that's another one of Richard Factor's inventions.
There are some olds, like one of the things that I have is, you know, I've been in radio now 23 years, and I have all my archives. And
nice.
The early years of my radio career are all recorded on cassettes. So there's the cassette era of my career. Then there's like the DAT era, the mini disc era, the CD era, and then like the MP3 era. And I've got them all, but they're all in these different phases of my career, and I need to digitize them all because I've got interviews with people.
No, you don't want to digitize them.
Well, like preserve them somehow.
Yeah. Guess what's going to outlast all the digital stuff?
The tapes?
Yep. The cassettes. I'm not kidding.
Really?
Yeah. There's a joke we've got at the studio. It's like oh, we've got a thing coming in on DAT. It's like, and my buddy's like, well, DATs are self-erasing. Like, what do you mean? It's all digital tape. It self-erases because the information that's recorded on it, the digital information, is not recorded in the same frequency bandwidth that audio is. It's recorded way, way higher, like, gigahertz, I think. And the super top end stuff on tape is the first thing that goes. So I have amazing DATs from 30 years ago, and I put one of them in and there's nothing there.
Really?
Nothing.
But the cassettes will last.
The cassettes, I put the cassette in. I was like, oh man, this sounds so good. I have cassettes from 40 years ago.
Wow.
And they still play.
Well, I was going to take all the cassette recordings and make MP3s out of them and throw the cassettes away. And I'm obviously not going to do that now.
No. So the best thing you could do for your cassettes is to seal them up and just put them in a mild temperatured place. Not too cold, not too hot.
Just hold on to them.
Yeah. Don't ever get rid of them.
When you were growing up, when did you go from loving music to playing it yourself? And what instrument did you pick up first?
I don't have that in my notes, Carrie. Hang on a second. I have to think about this one.
Was it piano first because your mom was a music teacher?
I tried it. The thing I did was I tried so many different instruments. So the first instrument that I picked up, I don't really remember what that would have been. It must have been it might have been the let's just say the piano. But the thing was that so we had a piano in our house, and so I was always plunking around on that thing. But I didn't really get into to where I could play it pretty decent until much later. I think I played. I picked up the trombone, the trumpet, the saxophone, this and that, whatever, and then the guitar came later. And
did you ever play the clarinet?
Yeah,
because I'm a clarinet player.
Why not? Why wouldn't I play it, Carrie?
I don't know. I'm asking to see if you were a fellow clarinet player. I told Dean DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots that I played the clarinet. He was very impressed that I was a reed instrument player. Didn't want to talk about the tour. Wanted to talk about my clarinet playing in my adolescence.
Well,
it's not often that I have another clarinet player.
I wouldn't call myself a clarinet player. I was a sax player. Mm. I was pretty good. And I was a pretty good trumpet player. And
we could jam with some woodwind instruments for sure.
The thing cut out. What?
We could jam with our woodwind instruments for sure, because I still have my clarinet.
That's what I was going to ask you that. Yeah, I don't want to jam with you on that.
Is there any worse sound in the world than a bad clarinet player?
Yes. A bad violin player.
Ooh, yes, totally right. Yeah.
So were you in band?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
I was a marching band geek. Hell yeah.
Oh.
I didn't just play the clarinet. I played it and marched.
You were in high school, you were in band?
Yes.
Okay, so here's where our paths diverged. Is I was too embarrassed to be in band when I was in high school. I drew the line there. I was in band when I was in elementary school and then middle school.
Me too. And then
how many people stopped listening to us already, you think?
No, because this is the good stuff. These are the embarrassing stories. This is the stuff that people want.
Okay, go on.
So then I got to high school, and I was in high school from 1986 to 1990. Mm-hmm. So that was like a massive time in rock and roll and a defining time in music. And so all of like the music freaks were all like, that was where we got to have access to the instruments of any kind, and where you could go, like if you took band or were in the band and you had a free period, you could go to the music room.
Right.
So like it gave you access to that. So I was in the band, and even though I grew up in New England, for some reason the marching band wore cowboy hats. It was very unfortunate.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff was like you got to wear what?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think so.
The uniforms were horrendous. And of course, getting up early on like, parade days and football games and like all of that kind of stuff. Like, no. But yeah, I stopped playing because I suck at it. So this leads me to my next question. So they say that musical...
I hope I have notes on this. Go ahead.
They say that musical ability is the same part of the brain that gets exercised by language and math. So being a sound engineer and a musician yourself, I would think you would agree with that theory, right? That part of the brain works pretty good on you?
I don't know.
Do you speak any other languages?
Not really. Nothing conversational. A little French. You?
No, I suck at it. That's why. I suck at math. I sucked at the clarinet, and I don't speak any other languages. So I think that part of my brain doesn't work as well as some of the other ones, like talking. That one works fine.
You're very good at that.
Thank you.
I think, I don't know. I think that it's just a matter of patience and sticking to stuff and wanting to really do something badly. And then if you really want to do it, you'll do it.
So
go on.
Was playing the guitar then the defining thing for you? Was that the one that you were like,
no.
Okay, this is going to stick?
No, because I started playing guitar and then I stopped. I started playing it in middle school, and then I stopped. I did it for a year, and because actually I tried to play guitar. I wanted to play guitar when I was 5, and we had, and I still have it. We had a nylon guitar when I was 5, and we were in California, and I was listening to the Beatles, and I wanted to play. I wanted to be in the Beatles, right?
Who didn't? Yeah.
Right, and I couldn't play the freaking guitar when I was 5. I was so disappointed. So it was like, hey, you got to stick with it. Like, okay, well, I want it now, and so I had no patience for stuff. But I think so when I came back to it, let's see, the third time would have been, it's right at the end of high school. I took guitar lessons from a guy who was making a record at the local studio. This is where you can wake everybody up again. This is the good part. So I was like, oh, I want to hang out with this guy because he's making a record in a recording studio.
Ooh.
That was cool.
Yeah, of course it was.
And there was, and then that kind of tied into, around that time, music stores didn't have anything like what they have now. There was no mixers, barely anything. In my little Dayton hometown, there was a music store that had a PV mixer and an Ovation guitar and a couple other things, and that was it. And I saw that little mixer. I'm like, oh man, I want to use one of these things. I want to do this. And then I met this guy, and we're taking lessons, and he takes me to this recording studio, which still exists to this day. It's called Cybertechnics in Dayton, Ohio. And I went in there. I'm like, oh my God. It just blew my mind. Then that was it. That was the beginning for me with being in the studio. And I haven't put that down.
Growing up, knew I wanted to work in the music business, but had no musical ability. And so I had the dream of being a sound engineer and working,
Really?
and working in a recording studio because, you see it on all the music videos in the mid to late 80s, right? That all the bands had these videos on MTV of being in the recording studio. And I was like, yeah, I want to be the person behind that giant board of all the knobs and know what they do and to record like Motley Crue. Like, that's just going to be amazing. That's what I want to do. Yeah. And they didn't teach that in school. Nope. So I went to school for radio because I thought, all right, I'll learn how to record audio and kind of edit audio, and that'll be good. And then I started an internship after my freshman year of college at a recording studio in Worcester, Massachusetts, that is not there anymore, called Licks. And I quickly realized that the 27-piece mariachi band I recorded for that summer as an intern, that it was not Motley Crue. And basically, we were recording like one maraca at a time. And I was like, this is not what I was promised on MTV. And that is where my illustrious recording engineer career took this weird right turn, because we were recording commercials that companies would then give to radio stations. And WAAF was around the corner from Licks. And I was delivering commercials to their production guy that would go on the air. And one of the guys was like, oh, are you interning over there? And I said, yeah. And he's like, how do you like it? And I was like, And he was like, why don't you like it? And I was like, it's just, it's not fun. I don't like it. And he said, well, we're looking for interns. Do you want to intern here for the rest of the summer? And I was like, sure. And his name was Mitch Todd. And he still, to this day, works in radio. He works at Sirius XM. Booming voice like yours. And he used to do all of the WAAF like imaging, like, you're listening to WAAF with that big bassy voice. And I interned for him for the summer. And
when you walked into the radio station, did a light go off? Did you like, oh man, this is cool. I want to be in here.
No, because I was making these deliveries into the production studio. So I hadn't been exposed to like the fun part yet. And I was like, okay, well, at least it's still a recording studio. And then every once in a while, he needed a female voice for like a commercial. And so he would say, come over here and read this script for me. And all right, say it a little happier, or, can you say it a little slower? And so then he would give me a cassette of my voice on a commercial for an amusement park or like whatever it was. And I'm in college, and I would go home and be like, I'm in this commercial, like, and show it to my parents. And then one day that summer, Joan Jett walked into the radio station. And she was the first rock star that I met. And I went, oh, that's Joan Jett. And first of all, she was short. Like, I couldn't believe how tiny she was. She walked in, I'll never forget it, in a tank top, like a wife beater with no bra on, with like leather pants. I think she was smoking a cigarette. She didn't give a fuck. And I still have the autograph that she signed for me that day. And I was like, rock stars just like walk in here? And they were like, yeah, because it was around the corner from the arena. And so I was like, wow. And that was the first time that I was like, okay, this is cool. Because it wasn't like all the behind the scenes stuff, no offense, was not cool to me. Like, I didn't understand, like, I didn't have the patience, like you said, for the knobs and the wires and then eventually I started interning in the on-air studio. And that's kind of when I got exposed to the other side of it. And then I started an on-air thing on the college radio station. And that's when I was like, okay, I think this might be. But it wasn't a purposeful thing. It just kind of, I wanted to be you. And I failed.
You don't want to be me.
But I wanted to be an engineer. And I just I couldn't grasp any of it. It wasn't interesting to me at all.
But that's good that you tried. There's people that try to do stuff and it doesn't, they're too afraid to try. You tried it.
Well, I think it's an important lesson.
Back.
I think it's an important lesson that if you don't know what you want to do, try some things so you learn what you don't want to do. That was an important lesson for me, because that dream of working in a recording studio, until I tried it, I thought that was what I was going to do. And like, I'm glad that I did it and didn't like it and decided to do something else, because I learned that's not what I want to do. So let me pivot and do something else. That's important in any
It's
aspect
huge.
of life.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've got friends, or they'll call up and they'll say, oh, my little boy wants to get into, he wants to be an engineer. And I'm like, why?
Because they want to be the cool person behind all the knobs in the Motley Crue video, Paul.
No. But look, the thing is that right now the business is getting into the business now has got to be harder than ever. But these kids have some of these people I'm talking about have parents that can afford to send them to good colleges to do stuff, and they're actually smart kids, And he's like, well, Timmy wants to. He wants to do audio instead of going to college to get a degree in something real that's going to pay money, where you're not going to be starving at any point in your life. And I'm like, tell him no. If somebody really wants to do something, you have to fight for it, and now people are like, do you have any hookups? Can you get me a job? And I'm like, no, just go figure this shit out yourself.
Yeah, you got to claw your way in on your own.
That's what I did.
Yeah, me too.
I did it because I wanted to really, really badly.
I had so many interns at the radio station that just instantly wanted to be like a DJ. Like they wanted my job. And I was like, well, are you willing to do what I did to get my job?
I would say get out. And get out and go figure out how to get back in. Goodbye.
Well, that's what I said when I interned. I used to clean the heads on the tape decks. I used to mail stuff. I used to go get coffee. Like that's how you get in the door. If you're not willing to do those shitty jobs, you're not going to be ready to do the bigger, shittier jobs.
No.
So you got to do that stuff.
You got to try stuff. You got to, you have to do what's in your heart, and people usually do better at what they want to do.
Yeah.
I think.
Why spend your life doing something you hate? Especially now, I think a lot of people are realizing that through COVID, that if you're going to work or you're going to spend your time doing something, be passionate about it and love what you do.
Unless your dad is a chief surgeon somewhere and he wants you to be a doctor, and then you're going to get a really good job at a hospital and you'll be set for life and rich. Do that. Yeah,
but do you want to cut like, okay, you could be rich and a proctologist, but do you want to look at assholes all day? Literal assholes. I don't want to do that no matter how much money you pay me. I don't want to look at somebody's butthole all day.
No, I wasn't talking about that kind of a job.
I mean, so it's like, even though you're going to make a ton of money, do you want to spend your days doing that? And look, no. I'm not saying anything against proctologists because you provide an essential service. I don't find the joy that you may find going to work every day doing what you do.
No.
So when you were in high school, you get out, you play in the guitar, you go to that studio. What was your first job? Like when did you start actually on the path to doing what you do now?
First of all, when I got out of high school, I went to college, and then I was pining for this audio stuff.
What was your major?
Electrical engineering.
Oh, well, there you go.
And my first job, when I would come home in the summers, I would go back to that studio, and I would just do stuff. I didn't make anything. I don't think. What was I doing? I was working at some other place, and then I was working there like for nothing, and just hanging out and watching people make records because I was absolutely fascinated by it. I wanted to figure it out.
I didn't get paid either at my internship either. I just went because I loved it and wanted to do it, and they didn't pay me anything.
No, so I thought it was absolutely amazing. And what else happened? God, then I started engineering a little bit for this guy. And keep in mind, we're actually very close friends, me and this guy, Phil Mahaffey. that from Cybertechnics is the studio we're talking about. But he, there was a point where when I was in college, he wanted me to sign a contract so that I could not, if I quit working there, I mean, maybe at this time I was making a little bit of scratch, that I wouldn't be able to get a job within a ridiculous radius of his studio, so it wouldn't be, screw up, be competition.
He wanted a non-compete on your ass.
And I said, thank you, goodbye. And I went and worked. I immediately went and got a job at our competition at the other end of town. And that's when I started really, and the crazy thing is that I had like hardly any experience doing any of this stuff except for recording myself, because I kind of taught myself how to do this. I was writing stuff and recording myself and making my own songs and crap. And so the studio I go to work for is Troutman Sound Lab, and that's Roger Troutman, who's no longer with us. And in that summer, I engineered 3 iconic R&B records, which I didn't know were iconic at the time. You never know what's going to be iconic when you're doing it. And so it was like there's a song like "Computer Love" was a big one. That was, there you go. It's another song that was just gigantic for them. And Shirley Murdoch was an artist. "As We Lay" was a gigantic song for her. So like I did her solo record. She was signed to them, and then I did Zap 4, and then I did Roger's solo record, Roger Troutman's solo record. He was a genius, gifted guitar player, songwriter, producer, and he was a little mad too, but isn't everybody? And so I did that stuff, and then I moved on, and blah blah blah. And then a couple years later, I was in New York, and I was working at the Hit Factory, and I'm working with this group called Jodeci, and I heard them mention one of those records that from back in date, and I was like, what? Like, about this stuff? And it was really it was absolutely fascinating to me that something I had done back then in the early days actually became what it did.
Your career has always kind of straddled like R&B and rock, and you've succeeded at doing both. Can you talk about the similarities between both, but also what makes them different when you're working on them from your perspective?
Well, the similarities is that you're just making stuff sound good, and you're working on tunes, and you're trying to make everything, bring it to fruition. The things that are also cool about it is there's things I would take from, or it's not part of your question, but I would take things I would do in the rock world and apply it into the R&B thing. So like I took those tricks of making things sound aggressive, and I would put that in the R&B stuff, and they loved that. Oh my God. And then I started getting much more, some of the differences was in some of the stuff that was sort of maybe not the best part about the rock thing for me back then was that everything had to sound a certain, rock had rules about stuff. They wouldn't tell you, but things had to sound a certain way. And I was like really trying to get creative with stuff and try different things and whatever. And I always felt like I was treading on hallowed ground when I wanted to try something crazy, And I'll tell you a story about one of these things, but but when I would go and do the R&B stuff or the hip hop stuff, I mean, it wasn't even hip hop yet. I could just do whatever the hell I wanted, and they just were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing," And so I could just do the craziest stuff and experiment and be creative. And I was like, "Man, I like this. This is really cool."
Well, it was kind of a new format or a new genre, and whereas rock is kind of built on these principles and traditions, and you can kind of trace this evolution of rock and who's borrowing what from whom. But, hip hop, R&B, that kind of became this whole new thing. So that must have been exciting to be part of it in the beginning because, like you said, there were no rules.
No. And there was the one thing I was going to tell you from the rock thing is that there was this session that it could have been Joan Jett, and I wanted to do something, and let's just say it's them or not, but I said to somebody, I said, hey, I want to put this thing on our voice or whatever, I want to put this delay or something on this part, this thing or whatever, and somebody, might have been Ken, he's like, or it might have been Panenzio actually. I'd be like, like, you can do whatever the hell you want to this song, and there's no way you're going to fuck it up because this is a hit song. Nobody has guts like that anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe they do. I don't know. But people are so, everybody's like, so, everything's got to be so perfect. And back then, we're like, do whatever you want. You can't possibly fuck this song up. It's a hit. I was like, okay, I think I will. I think I will put that delay on the vocal.
Toby Wright told me a story about running a guitar sound out of a practice amp through an oscillating fan to get an effect on a Korn record. Because he was just,
I like that.
He was just looking, it's the very beginning guitar part of Got the Life. And he was just like, guys, I just want to experiment. Can you give me some examples from your career of like weird things that you've done in the studio to get sounds and things to sound a certain way that actually made the record, that actually worked?
Yeah, I mean, I love that thing that the Toby did, that what you're talking about. That's genius. I did stuff like when we got into the hip hop thing with Jodeci, there was one of the early remixes that I did for them. I started because I was, coming from the rock thing, I was working with rock bands on one day, and then I was going in and then here's Jodeci, and we're doing this remix at the Hit Factory. And there's guitar amps around. I'm like, bring that Fender over here, plug it in, put a microphone in front of it. And so I was running beats and weird stuff into the guitar amp and just cranking the shit out of it and recording that. And, that's on the record. All that kind of stuff is on the record, just running things. I was putting their stuff through guitar amps and nobody knows it.
They do now.
They do now.
What was the first time that you felt like you actually made it? Or that, I might actually be good at this? Like, what do you remember sitting in the studio and going like, okay, I made it because I'm doing this?
No.
No?
No. I'll tell you, that was from my notes here, Carrie. There's fast forward to mastering times now. There was a time like what you're saying where I felt like, not that I had made it, but that I was doing something really good. I felt really good about it. I was working on my first Anthrax record with Jay Rustin. And hang on one second. And we're in the middle of I'm in the middle of mastering the record, and Jay says, he says, you want to work on another project for me? Are you available? And I wasn't even done with the Anthrax record, and I was like, oh, this is good. I felt like I was onto something. That's the sensation. I felt like I was onto something when that happened with Jay, and then that was the beginning of a very great relationship that still exists.
I remember when another radio station called me when I was on the air to ask. They called the request line because they didn't have another way to get a hold of me. And they called to ask if I were under contract. This was the early days. And I said no. And they said, okay, so we're allowed to talk to you. And when another radio station was asking about hiring me, I was like, whoa. Same kind of thing. Like when you're getting asked, like they wanted to hire you for another job before you finished the one you had.
Right.
Like, oh, this might be
on something.
This might be what I'm supposed to do. Like I might actually be able to do this and be successful.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird.
Yeah. I think, I don't know about you, but I've never been too comfortable with anything. So I feel like I've always, you could get fired at any moment.
Yeah.
You can always be fired.
I know what that means. It happened to me.
God.
Well, I mean, we didn't get fired. They just unplugged the station. So I guess, yeah, fired, but.
That was rough.
Yeah.
That was terrible.
Yeah, it was a death. It was a death. It felt like my best friend died. The friend that like was part of every memory. I mean, I think every person, no matter the genre, you grow up, hearing the music you love, and it's like, oh, you're in the car or whatever, you got the radio on, you talk to any band and like, oh, do you remember the first time you heard your song on the radio? They always have a story about that and where they were and what song it was and how they acted. And so for a station like that to be gone and to have this voice of a city and an influential rock station like what you and I were talking about earlier to just all of a sudden not exist anymore. And it was my first, it's the first radio station I ever worked at, and I was there for 29 years.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So
yeah,
when
that's
so all of a sudden it's like you're like, well, okay, that's not there anymore. What do I do now? Like, where do I go? What do I do? It's weird.
Well, I'm a big fan of radio, so
yeah,
I feel for that. Big
You're
time.
married. I'll say this because I don't want to put your private life on blast, but you're married into radio.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Absolutely.
So you have an understanding of it, not only the artist perspective of it, because you're making the music that ends up on the radio, but also you kind of understand like the behind the scenes inner workings of it because you're married into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we can say my wife's name. It's Carol Miller.
It's okay?
Yeah, sure.
So your wife is a legendary DJ, radio host in her own right, but a trailblazing female radio host, someone whose career I knew about before I knew you. And when I met you originally, I didn't know that that's who your wife was. And then when I found out who you were married to, I was like, what? And I went really creepy fangirl. Like, I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? So yeah, she's a big deal.
She is a big deal.
Yeah. Huge deal to me.
Huh?
Huge deal to me. There's a whole generation of female radio DJs that are standing on the shoulders of women like Carol Miller, 100%.
That's huge. I mean, so I felt for what you were going through with when AAF closed down, the same way that, because we went through that when NEW went. In New York.
Yeah, which was a legendary, famous New York station that was just kind of, everybody just took it for granted that it would always be there.
Yeah. And then before that, that happened when we were, during the time when we were together. So that was, I saw her go through that, but she also went through that with PLJ. But I don't want to get stuck on this thing, but
yeah, no. But it is, as the industry changes and as, when you're trying to figure out your own place in this kind of crazy career, I understand what you're talking about, where you always kind of have this fear that even though I was at the same station for 29 years, it's like you always live on this razor's edge, like it could just always go away. With radio, you live based on the ratings. I think when you do what you do, it's like, you know, you're going to live and die by the success of like your last project. So you always are kind of hoping that you're going to be able to continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, you probably, of course you wouldn't know this, but I was afraid I was going to get fired at any moment during the Raw record, not from Sahaj, but from the label, because they did not want me to produce that record.
Really?
No. Sahaj really, you know, props to Sahaj. He really fought for me to do that. But like we developed, and the only reason that happened is because we developed a relationship before he got signed. And I don't know if you remember what the climate was like back then, but so it was Universal Republic.
Yep. And
Tom Mackay was the A&R guy. He's like blown up legend now and everything. And we were I think the only other band besides Three Doors Down was on on Republic. And so
Godsmack was too, right? Didn't they sign to Universal Republic? I think they did too.
I guess. Yeah. But so the other bands were gigantic.
Yeah.
And we got in there because of you. Right? That's why we were there.
And
you blew them up.
I had a pretty candid conversation with Chris Daughtry about what we're talking about here, and that, you know, he gets this record deal coming out of American Idol, and all of the influences with the big kind of corporate machine that he got signed into. And he talked about the influence of the A&R guy and the label people and the promotions people, and how that kind of had an influence over the end product being his music, and how tough that can be.
Yeah. So we were, you know, so we're making this record, and you know, I was afraid that if I did anything wrong, I was going to get fired. And we had a window of about a month to record and mix the record. And we did it. You know, it was insane, but we did it. So, you know, that's part of the reason why I didn't have my wife to the studio, you know, because I was like nose to the grindstone. And but the label would not, they didn't show up, but more than maybe once or twice the whole time we were there. And I was like, man, they just don't give a shit. You know, so I wanted them to talk about us back at the office. And so I started doing some crazy things. So I built a pyramid out of construction materials that were there because they were building some, they were expanding the studio. And I'm like, can I have this stuff? I'm like, sure. So in the middle of the room, we made a giant pyramid and we recorded a lot of the record inside the pyramid. Because I wanted to, man, he's nuts. He's making it in a pyramid. You know, like I wanted to think I was like some crazy Alan Parsons guy or something. Just whatever, you know. And you know, none of that stuff ever happened. I was really disappointed that no one was like, what is he doing there? We must go see what's going on.
You're that kid trying to get dad's attention, like doing things, you know, trying to poke him a little bit. Just even if it's negative attention, I just want some attention.
But I was also doing that so I could. I had to prove or disprove a theory, which there's no such thing as pyramid power. I figured if there was, that we would have been a big success.
I don't know. It's a pretty amazing record. To this day,
an amazing record.
It still holds up. It's a great record. It sounds great.
Thank you.
The songs are great.
Yeah, but there's no pyramid power.
There's no pyramid power. Can we talk about some of the artists that you've worked with? And because when you work in the studio, you're not getting the wardrobe wearing, polished hair and makeup, sitting down for an interview side of the artist. You're getting the come in sweatpants, the raw, real kind of person. So can you talk about, with whatever you're willing to talk about, like you worked with Tina Turner.
Yeah.
What was that like? It's Tina Turner.
Yeah. With a T.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I mean, there was 2 different times I worked with Tina Turner. One was back in the Hit Factory days, and I was an assistant for Chris Lord, Algie. And we recorded this thing with a live band, and it was incredible. I mean, my God, there was Tony Joe White was on guitar. And a distant friend of mine, Jeff Bova, was on keys. Became friends with him, and Steve Jordan might have been on drums. I can't remember. And they would just do she would be in the middle of this room, and everybody's around her. It's big enough to put a whole band in, and then some, and she would sing live down with the band. And it was incredigo. And she was very, very proud of of her ability to nail it. And she'd get to the mic and we would hit record and be like, first one. And then she would sing it.
One take Charlie.
She could, there was ones where it was, where it wasn't, but she would just get up there and she would own it, so that you knew that if that was the take, she'd be like, first one. It was like, bang.
Wow.
Incredible. She was incredible. That was that's Foreign Affair. That was the record that was 89 or something, 88.
And then to show your range, you worked with Pantera.
Yeah, also back then. But that's and now still as a mastering. But back then, no one knows it because I was a little side note was I was a ringer for Mark Ross back then. I was pretty good mixing back then, and so Mark was at Atco, and Mark is the son of Stephen Ross, the famous Stephen Ross. He's in Hitmen. You've heard of that book? Mm-hmm. It's a good book. And anyway, so Mark and I struck a relationship long before that Pantera thing, but and so this is like in, I don't know, maybe 89 or something like that. And back then, and I'd done did like maybe 2 or 3 other albums with Mark. And then this thing comes up and he's like, I'm working on this. He's Paul, I'm working on this project. I want you to just come in here and listen. And they were already working in the room or something. And, or no, he calls me on the phone. He's like, I want you to check something out, and I want you to work with this band Pantera. And I was like, oh, I love Pantera. It's like the car, Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. Pantera. Like I love Panteras. And so he says, the record, no offense to who's the guy that did it? He says, Terry, no offense to Terry Date, but so somebody wasn't happy with the singles. So there's 3 singles on this record. So there was, and he's like, will you come in and mix this? I'm like, okay. So we go in there and bring it up on the board, and I did this and that, whatever to it, and made it sound different. And it was just me and Mark working on it at Hit Factory Times Square. And those songs were Cowboys from Hell, the song, Cemetery Gates, and then another one. And it was, and this was just like another project that I did with Mark, and Mark was a mad scientist in the studio. So I was like, okay, let's see what happens with this one. It was another one that, everything else before that, nothing happened with those things. And so, a year or two, whatever, a couple of years later, I'm like listening to the radio. I'm like, shit, I did that. But the problem, and then the record comes out, and then I'm, Mark is like, he's like, I'm really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. Your name isn't, you didn't get credited. And we'll leave it at that. So, and it never got fixed.
Oh, that sucks.
But, so I went into, I went into different things and did this and that, whatever. I don't regret anything because, especially that, is that so many other great things happened in my life that wouldn't have happened if anything would have been different. I wouldn't be with my wife, so
yeah.
I don't give a shit.
So. Did you work with Biggie, or did you work on his music?
I worked with him.
So how was he as a person?
Very,
what was he like to be in the studio in that time? Because it's so famous. Like, those images are so iconic, and those songs, like you said, like, you don't know what's going to stand the test of time. And then in the moment, and now he's a legend.
He was he was Big Papa. He was he's in the studio and he was hanging out, and he was just, everybody loved him. And there those sessions, were at Daddy's house, Puffy's studio. And, he's a big roly-poly guy, and he'd be sitting there in the corner, and people would be, coming surrounding him and stuff, and he'd be telling stories or whatever. And he'd sit there and watch me mix or whatever, or wait. And, I'd record him sometimes, he'd put a verse on something, and it was awesome, and there was people around, like Carl Thomas would be, people would sing, like they would sing and do stuff in the session, in the control room, while other shit was going on. I'm trying to work or do something, and they're doing all this stuff. and he's just sitting there, and he's just the nicest guy ever to me, and I've worked with some nasty guys that were rappers, but he was one of the nicest guys. And I was so devastated when he got gunned down. It was just ridiculous. He would never, and then that sort of thing was happening to people, but we'll come back to that. I had an analogy for you.
Well, go ahead.
I worked with, Pantera and Biggie. It's like, what's the difference between rock and hip hop? Well, rock, the fans killed the artists, and in hip hop, the artists killed the artists.
Yeah. It's
screwed up.
Yeah. I mean,
it's terrible.
Being on the air the day that, Dimebag got killed late at night, right? So we were kind of up all night, and then having to go on the air the next day. Devastating.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you said, it's impossible to kind of predict in the moment what those iconic artists, songs, albums are going to be, because when you're recording them, there's so much uncertainty. But now when you go back and look, it's like, the guys from Pantera, when it comes to the bedrock of like heavy metal, like they're in that conversation. When it comes to hip hop, you can't have a conversation without Biggie. Like you can't.
Yeah. But his legacy is also promoted through, Bad Boy and Puffy and on and on and on. It gets promoted, but it gets promoted as part of the product in a sense. No disrespect, but in rock, people don't do that.
Right.
It's a weird thing to me. That's it's having seen from both sides, but anyways, I lost. I was going to tell you something. I lost it. Go ahead.
Well, when we're talking about the range of the artists, there are so many people that work in the industry that, like for me, right? Like I couldn't just get on and do hip hop radio. Like I wouldn't even know where to begin. But you have had this fascinating career where it's like, you know, one day you're working on a Cradle of Filth record, and the next day you're working on a Mary J. Blige record. I mean, that's a pretty wide spectrum for anybody. But you're, well, yeah, you're going to say exactly what.
Doesn't feel different to me. It doesn't feel wide.
Really?
No.
Why?
Because it's still me. I'm me, and I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
I'm just making it sound good. That's it.
So
and I'll find something in it that's like, oh, there's this cool thing about, you know, this or whatever that I'm working on that, you know, it's like, and then there it is, and it's you'll hear it.
I forget. I think it was Zach Wilde who said, like, it's not the perfect example, the perfect record, whatever, but it's your favorite. I think Steve Vai said that to Zach, and Zach quoted Steve Vai on my show. So is there a perfect album that you worked on that when it's done or listening back at it over your career that you're like, okay, that, even if it wasn't successful, but you're like, to your ears, it's perfect?
I don't even know how to answer that. I've never thought of that.
Really?
No.
All right. Well, I'll ask you this question because I ask every songwriter this question that I have on the show. Give me an example or two of any genre, any artist, any era. That doesn't matter. An example of what you think perfect songwriting is. A song that you think is so good that you wish you wrote it. So Beatles, but pick one and explain why the structure of the song is perfect. Like, that's why, from the songwriting perspective, I want you to break it down why it's so good.
So Beatles, because Beatles, but did you see the Get Back thing?
Oh my God.
You saw it, right?
My mind exploded and oozed out my ears.
Yeah.
I became emotional. The first 15 minutes, I felt like I was watching deep fakes. Did you feel that way? Because this footage, because every image of the Beatles is just famous at this point, right? So to see never before seen footage didn't seem real. I felt, you know?
I was blown away on so many different levels with the thing.
Yeah. I was emotional.
Yeah, but I was, all these, like I'm on the dreaded, book thing, and I see pictures of stuff. You know what I'm talking about, that online book thing?
Yeah. The Book of Faces.
Yeah. I see pictures of stuff from that time, from Twickenham Studios all the time. I'm like, oh man, that's so cool. I never get tired of seeing that stuff. And then I'm watching this and like, they're moving.
Yeah.
This is so cool.
It didn't seem real. Like, I kept waiting to see, is it computer generated? Like, it can't be real because we've never seen these images before.
We've seen some of them, but what they did, see, I also, I'm a bit of a nerd, and if you didn't know. And so I heard stuff about how they did some of the things in there. So I was kind of already prepped. I was primed for this thing. And so there's so much stuff that happens in the beginning when they first move into Twickenham.
Yeah.
That's not even lit. They processed all the film. Oh, this is I think it's all 16 millimeter stuff, and they didn't bring out the big fancy cameras until later, right? Nothing was even there weren't even microphones on anything. All they had was 2 boom mics that were going into these tiny little recorders, these tape machines, and that was it. 2 mono recorders, and that was it for the whole thing. And they went in and they fixed everything up, and the lighting looks very contemporary. I was like, oh my God, like they did such a great job with the pictures and the audio. They went in and they did stuff like, there's all kinds of software now where you can remanipulate the sounds of stuff, and you can change the vocal levels on things out of a 2-track. It's crazy what you can do now. You can turn the drums up and down in a mix that's been mixed. without a multi-track. It's stupid. So they did all that kind of stuff and more on the Beatles. And I was like, technically I was just flipping out. And so the answer to your question finally is, him watching McCartney write Get Back.
Oh my God, that's what I thought you were going to say. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. So, so it's, I mean, how long I've lived with this stuff my whole freaking life.
Yeah.
And I've had, dreams and thought about how they did stuff. I had my own ideas how they did stuff, and I was completely, pretty wrong. And there was so much stuff. I even saw the thing, with Rick Rubin and Paul.
I was going to ask you if you saw that too, which I thought was equally fascinating but different.
It was, but it didn't give you the view that this thing did.
Yes.
It was like shit. And so seeing it, and I didn't realize how. I knew they were. Everybody knows they're fast. I knew they were fast. And I'm in the business, so I know how fast. I know what fast is.
What do you mean fast? Like writing songs quickly?
Yeah, working fast and writing fast and getting things done fast. Like I know what that's about. But I was watching this, and I'm like, oh my God!
You can clock it. He wrote Get Back in 3.5 minutes?
All of his stuff is like that, though. He just smokes the stuff out, and maybe not everything is, well, listen to the McCartney Christmas song. That's crap.
I like it. I don't give a fuck.
Whatever.
I refuse to apologize for it. It's not Christmas till I hear that song.
That's great. So so the Get Back thing, I'm like, what blew me away about watching him write was like, oh my God, like he's winging it on the bass. He's just doing really basic stuff. And he was pissed off at George because George was trying to make things too complicated. He wanted to put the icing on the cake before the cake was done, and remember that part? And he's like, I'll play what you want me to play.
Yeah.
or I won't play anything at all. Whatever it is that pleases you. Like, oh God.
I know.
This isn't going to go well. But watching him construct that song was just like, jaw-dropping to me. And is it the best song in the world? No, but it's an amazing song. And watching him as a craftsman sit down and do stuff, and it's like everything, like, and you go through, this is why the Beatles are just blow my mind 100-fold more after seeing this thing, because they went in with a 2-week schedule and they just wrote hit after hit after hit. It's insane what they did.
P.S.
That's all they did.
They were done as a band by 30?
Before. I mean, right in that movie, McCartney was 26. George was 24. And they were like, they already did all the cool stuff.
Yeah.
Sgt. Pepper, everything was all of it was all done, and they would just sit there and like, right, bang, 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 bang. And, and he's like, oh, he's off talking to somebody. I'll see him to go to the piano and write,
Hey Jude or Let It Be, or I'll just go over there and just tool around and write something iconic.
This thing, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, fuck. You see this thing. And you'd hear, or you would hear something, and I know we're off topic right now.
No, we're not. We're not.
You'd hear the beginning of a song, and it didn't sound like it because it hadn't been developed yet.
Yes.
But then you were like, and then as soon as you got to the point, you're like, oh shit, and then it was like Lennon McCartney. Like, God damn.
Yeah. It's like getting to watch Monet start with the canvas and watch the famous painting that now is like on bed sheets. But you didn't get to see it as it was being painted. You only got to see it when it was done.
Right.
And this was kind of like, okay, well, we'll just start peeling the layers back. And now you can see watching it, I was, like you said, like, wait, I know that sound. I know that note. Oh, I know what song he's writing. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I just watched how he did that. That's why I'm so envious of the songwriting process, because I don't get that. So recently I talked to Leslie Mandoki. Do you know who Leslie Mandoki is?
No.
He's like a prog rock, like progressive, like jazz cat. And he plays with like Ian Anderson and like all of these guys. He escaped the Iron Curtain from Hungary, like ran through a tunnel and escaped and like wanted to like make music. And he's in this band now called the Mandoki Soulmates. And he does, you know, he plays with guys from Cream and Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull and like all this stuff. And he owns this massive recording studio complex in Stellenberg, outside of Stellenberg, Germany or something like that. Anyway, when I asked him the songwriting question, he said that he feels just like a conduit almost, where like he's just in the environment and the environment gives you the songs. It's just whether or not he can represent it and like translate what the world is doing around him. And he's just able to see it, whether it be the music or whatever, and funnel it into music. Like,
okay.
Like like the idea of a sculptor, like that sculpture's inside, you're just clearing away the rock to show it. And so I don't have that ability to like get inspired by, you know, like Leslie Mandoki told me a story about Sting and the song that he wrote about, do the Russians, you know, the Russians love their children too. And it was because he was holed up in a hotel room in New York, and they were just watching TV, and they were shocked to watch this Russian cartoon, and how it was so happy and pleasant and written and drawn with such love for their children. And he watched that and got inspired, and then wrote this iconic song out of it. Like, it's the same kind of, like, I don't get how that works. So being able to watch the process, watch Paul McCartney sit down and do that is like, what?
It's seeing that is like, I don't even think you have to be a Beatles fan to appreciate it, but maybe you do. But that's what it's like, kind of like what it's like being in the music business in a recording session. You know, there's a thing that I could relate to from it, which is the scheduling in particular. When I saw the thing, I was like, oh God, like, you know, we've got 2 weeks. I'm like, oh Jesus, how are they going to do that? You know, and and I'm thinking, oh my God, like we even know what happened, and I was like, oh my God, how are they going to do it? You know,
wait, I'm going to watch Titanic. The boat sinks. I know how it ends.
I know, right. You know, so, and I'm watching this thing, and it was done. This thing was done so well, the Get Back movie, and you know, I've made so many records where you go in, and you know, us being on the other side of the glass, you know, we know what's up, right? You know, we think things through a little bit, and they're like, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna be done at this time. I'm like, no, we're not. I don't think so.
That's not how it works.
I think we're going to need more time. We're not going to get any sleep, you know, blah, 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 and like that. And so, and I'm watching this Beatles thing, and they're like, you know, day one, and the thing goes through the thing, and they go the next day. There's nothing there. Nothing. There's no lights, no cameras. There's no microphones. There's no recording equipment. And I'm like, and there's no songs. And then day two and whatever, and it's like, and then, and you're like, oh shit. And they show you the calendar, and then they're like, oh well, see you on Monday. And I'm like, no, 2 days.
They took a weekend.
What the hell are they thinking? 2 days off? No, it's like, that would be like the stuff I was doing was 24 hours a day. I would be working seriously. Like I used to do crazy stuff back in the early days.
I was watching it, and I know that as a Beatles fan, you know, the whole Yoko thing or whatever, but I'm watching it and I'm like, does she need to sit in the circle with the band? Does she need to be, like, I was offended that she was knitting while they were writing songs. I was like, why are you sitting there knitting, Yoko?
You know what? I have a completely different view of the whole Yoko thing.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so give me your view.
I think that George threw the first stone.
Really?
Yeah, because guess who was the first person to show up at the set at Twickenham. It was the Baldies.
Okay.
The guy was sitting, no offense. Okay, so it was one of his Hare Krishna buddies.
Yeah.
So like, and then there was two of them.
Yeah. They were just kind of hanging.
And that was way before Yoko ever showed up.
But they weren't sitting in the circle, though. Like
they were there.
But they were there.
They were there, and they were like looking at them, and like, who's that? And McCartney's like, he's clean. At least he's clean. Which is a line from the Hard Day,
Yeah.
the other movie, for those that don't know. But anyways.
Then I had to think, like, was John Lennon, and this is where you start peeling back the onion, and this is what I took from the Rick Rubin thing. John Lennon, coming out of the upbringing he had, could he have written the songs he wrote, especially there? Like, did he need Yoko? Did he need her there as this support? And so at that point, I have to give her a break. Because if he wanted her there, if he couldn't do the work without her there, then
he was happy. He was happy because she was there.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
We all know, they had a crazy life and a crazy schedule. They worked 24/7.
Yeah.
And according to Ringo, Paul would take one day off a month to judge a beauty contest. You ever hear that one?
Yeah.
So they just worked all the time, and we've all been around musicians who that's all they do.
Yeah.
We are even though you're in radio and I'm in the studio, and our friends are out touring and stuff. We're still kind of part of the circus, so we see what goes on in the circus, right?
And this industry, no matter what part of it you're in, requires that. Like, you don't get to punch a time card and work banking hours. You just it's the business doesn't work that way.
No. And so back to the Yoko thing, I think that, he doesn't have time to go home and be a husband or be a boyfriend. They don't have time to go home and they don't have time to see each other because he's so famous that people are just clawing at them everywhere they go. They can't go out in public. So where are they going to hang out? At work.
Yeah.
So who cares? George was bringing Hare Krishnas in. I would have been more pissed about that because they're just sitting there looking at you.
Yeah.
All day long. I mean, and they didn't even talk. They didn't even know them. It's like, at least Yoko, and she could. I don't like how she sings, but at least she was there.
Yeah.
She was a little cuter back then, and she was she was there. She was part of the thing, and John loved her, and so it was just the thing. And then there was stuff where everybody else brought their wives and girlfriends in. George didn't bring in his girlfriend because she was probably, or wife, because she was probably running around with Eric Clapton. Remember?
Yeah, the way that they did that stuff back in the day, that was.
I'm like, did Eric, George, he becomes friends with George, and he's like, hey man, I've got this song. I want you to check it out. Maybe you play solo on it for me. Yeah. Layla.
Yeah.
Song he wrote for
Brass
for George's wife.
Brass balls.
No. Yeah. And then they're still friends.
I know. Only dudes could pull that off. There's no fucking way girls would ever allow that to happen.
And I'm thinking that George has probably just had it with all this stuff under tremendous pressure as a young 24-year-old, having his wife stolen by Eric Clapton while he's making ostensibly a bad Beatles record.
Well, I loved the Rick Rubin thing for different reasons. So the first thing was, I loved that Rick showed people that aren't kind of familiar with like the production side. Like, as soon as I saw the mixing board with all the pieces of tape, I was like, oh, I know what he's going to do. Because I've spent time in recording studios where it's like, here's the piece of tape that labels all the channels and whatever. So I thought that was really cool. But the thing that changed how I listen to the Beatles that I got from that Rick Rubin thing was the breakdown of the yin and the yang of Lennon-McCartney. The cynicism of the John Lennon upbringing and what he brought to the sound versus the happy childhood that Paul McCartney had and what he brought. So that when it was a happy melody and a melancholic kind of lyric or vice versa, it was that yin and yang, that good and evil of Lennon and McCartney that made the Beatles songs what they are. I never attributed it to their upbringing before until Paul McCartney kind of explained that in that special, and it blew my mind. Because then I went back and I was like, oh yeah, you can tell that McCartney, like this music is so happy, but then Lennon comes in with this like sad cynicism about like whatever, and laid on top of a happy melody, you're like, oh, that's what makes it. Because if it were all happy or all sad, it wouldn't be good. But I listen to the Beatles now because of that so differently.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's what I took out of it that changed me.
The thing that changed me was how Paul could sit with Rick Rubin being barefoot the whole time. I thought that was really disrespectful.
To be barefooted in front of Paul McCartney?
He's Sir Paul McCartney.
Trust me, I get it. I would put shoes on.
I mean, come on. It's like, here, we're going to do a special. We're going to do something really important. And I'm just going to wear shorts and be barefoot. What do you think?
See, I didn't even really notice the barefoot thing, but now the next time I watch it, I'm going to be like, oh, Paul, why now I can't stop looking at his feet.
I just is like, obviously McCartney was okay with it, but I'm like, yeah, are you going to put some socks on? What's up?
The guy wrote Let It Be. Put on some shoes.
God, it was crazy.
Yeah, it is pretty funny.
The thing that was funny about that special with Rick is, at this point, the Beatles don't want any questions. They're really past it. I mean, they've had millions and millions of the same question over and over again that they're just like,
well, can you imagine doing something at 25 or 26 or 27 and now you're 80 and people still want to talk about
that's cool. I'd be okay with that. But here's my point though, is that it's like Rick kept asking all these. Some of them were really stupid, dumb questions. I'm like, how's he getting away with this shit?
Because he's Rick Rubin.
If I asked to be like, who is this guy? Have him, get rid of him.
Well, you and I wouldn't be able to be in the room. Rick Rubin got in the room and obviously got to stay because he wasn't even wearing shoes.
Right. But it's, you realize that Rick must be really special to be able to ask some of those questions. I was like, huh? Can't you think of something better?
Yeah. People say that about me in my interviews all the time.
No, this is great. You're a great interviewer. This is fun.
Well, I think when you're talking about something that you love, I mean, I've never interviewed a Beatle, but I've interviewed close at least in the rock world, and when you have a conversation, after a while, you kind of forget that, like it's happened to me where I'm supposed to ask the questions. Oh, fuck. Okay. Yeah. I'm doing the interview because you just, after a while, just having a conversation. So I'm sure at one point or another, Rick, who I'm sure has known Paul McCartney outside of that special. That's not the first time they met.
Absolutely.
So it's like he probably didn't even realize he was asking a stupid question because they were just rapping. They're just friends.
I'm just busting on him. I was just, he was able to get away with some, like, I'd like to ask Paul some stupid questions like that. I would have to think too hard before. It's like, what could I possibly ask him that he hasn't heard before? That's where my brain would be going. But
it just cracks me up that, like, no matter how famous you are in music, right? It doesn't matter. Like, okay, Puffy, Tina Turner, like there are just these legends in music and there is this like pyramid, right? And then it's like, but are you a Beatle?
Right.
Like, no? Okay.
Right.
Like who was it? Was it Dr. Dre? Who was it that recently sat down with Paul McCartney and put selfies up on his Instagram? It was like Dr. Dre or like somebody like that. And it's like Like, here's this person that is literally like carved in the bedrock of the Mount Rushmore of hip hop, and he's nerding out that he's taking a selfie with Paul McCartney.
Was it Kanye?
No, it wasn't Kanye. I think it was Dr. Dre.
Okay, because he worked with Kanye.
Yeah. No, this just happened like this week.
Oh,
I just saw it online. Yeah.
On the book thing?
Do you mean the interwebs?
No, that book thing.
Yeah, it was Dr. Dre. He called Paul McCartney his hero. And literally like put a picture up on Instagram of him, like a selfie with him and Paul McCartney.
That's cool.
And Paul McCartney was just like chilling on his couch, P.S., wearing pajamas.
Oh, God. McCartney was?
Yeah, pajama bottom. Now, they may be like $1,000 pants, but they look like pajama bottoms in the picture.
See, that's why he was okay with Rick being barefoot.
Yeah. He said, here with one of my heroes, McCartney is cool AF. I'm chilling with one of the fucking Beatles. Dr. Dre wrote that. So there you go. I don't care how famous you are. When you're in the room with a Beatle, it's different.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I got to assist on a McCartney song.
Was he in the room?
No.
Oh, damn it.
But there was so back in the Hit Factory days, there was what was it? There was right around then there was a single that had just come out that I was a big fan of, and my friend Tim Leitner just comes back from England and he plops this single CD on the console, and it was this one from Paul McCartney. And no, it was My Brave Face.
Oh.
Had just come out, and I'd never heard it before, and I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And I've been a fan of his solo stuff. Not all of it, but some of it I liked quite a bit. And then right the next week, I get a call from Troy Germano, and he's like, "You're working with Clear Mountain on Paul McCartney." So I was like, "Oh my God!"
What? You know, he was in the Beatles, right?
And I was just blown away. And it was, and the funny thing with that is that version is not on, I think Flowers in the Dirt was the record.
I think so.
And so the version that we did isn't on the record. So I don't have a credit on a McCartney record.
Ah.
Again, I'm screwed.
You got so screwed.
But I'll find the thing and email it to you. It's the one I worked on with, assisted Bob Clearmountain was, it's on YouTube somewhere, and it's a much better version than what's on the record. And that's a testament to engineers and whatnot, making something out of something.
Yeah.
Making more out of something, because he just totally found the song. And that was just one of McCartney's things where he just, blah, 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 blah. Get back.
I know, it's crazy. I interviewed a girlfriend of mine. Her name's Karen Durcott, and she was big in radio promotion on the label side. And I wanted to have her on because she had this amazing career. Like, she worked Appetite for Destruction at Rock Radio and drove a very young, drunk Slash around to do radio interviews, like when Welcome to the Jungle hit the radio before the record even came out. And she, at the end of her career before she retired, told me this great story about how she was working a McCartney project. And he was I don't know if he was in the building at Sirius XM or whatever, and he was doing a bunch of interviews. And she was like, "Can I get you anything?" or whatever. And he was really sweet and wanted a real New York bagel and wanted Vegemite or Marmite. Wanted Marmite because he grew up eating it in England post the war, And she told this hilarious story. Now, this woman had a legacy career in rock and roll, working in radio, has met everybody, done everything. And there she is running around fucking Lower Manhattan to get Paul McCartney the best bagel and Marmite. And he sat in the lunchroom and was just eating his bagel, and like people were coming in to get their lunch out of the fridge, and they're like, "Oh, that's Paul McCartney eating a fucking bagel in my lunchroom." Like,
God,
what? But she just was like, I'm getting a bagel. If fucking Paul McCartney wants a bagel, he's getting a bagel. Like,
that's amazing.
it's got to be weird to be at that level. You know, like I've been around famous people, you know what I mean? And see how people act around them. It's got to be weird to like be someone that's at that level where it's impossible for anyone to be normal around you. Like anybody. Like how does anybody get to be normal around you?
I don't think that the people that are like that want to be normal.
Really?
No. They want badly to be where they're at. Really bad. I've been around people like that.
Like
Puffy's like that. He wants to. He tried really, really, really hard to position himself to where he is.
Yeah. And good on him because he started with nothing and built everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want to be normal.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
I get that.
And a lot of people, there are people that just there's nothing wrong with it. That just have this intense crave for attention or fame or something. They really, really, that's their thing. And I think that some of the people that are super, super famous are like that. I mean, you interviewed Dave. I don't know if you're friends with him, but that was a great. You've done a couple. I've seen those are really good. What's he like?
Dave who? Wait, who?
Grohl.
Oh, well, I sat down with him backstage at Fenway Park. Pat was there. Taylor Hawkins walked in and he sat with us, and it was on the tour after he broke his leg.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to go in and interview him, and they couldn't have been nicer. But I get asked this question all the time. You know, like, what's so-and-so like? What's so-and-so like? Or who's the biggest asshole you've ever met? Like, I get asked those questions all the time. And the answer I give is, it doesn't behoove the artist to go out of their way to be a dick to me. Like, I'm there to help them. I'm there to promote them. I'm there to interview them. I go out of my way to be accommodating, to make them comfortable. If they come into my studio, I always find out what they like to drink. I find out, I learned a lot about singers because I would do the legwork ahead of time and talk to management and say, well, if they're coming to play acoustic in the studio, what can I get them to drink? Do they want room temperature water? Do they want, lemon water? Do they not drink anything? Are they going to want a coffee? Mm-hmm. Do they need a shot of Jack at 8 a.m. to get going? Like, what is it? And so I go out of my way because I know that those people are on tour and they're in a different place every day. They don't have that semblance of home. And so to take that little bit of extra time to kind of be accommodating and show that I appreciate your time. You're coming on my show. I want to at least give you the respect of making you comfortable, making sure there's food there, making sure you know where the bathroom is, like just that kind of stuff. And so it's very rare that people are not nice to me.
I wouldn't think so.
Because it doesn't really make any sense for them to be dicks. There's some that I've been around that were a little more high maintenance. But I think when you're asking a singer that's used to going on stage at 9 o'clock at night to come in and sing at 11 o'clock in the morning, I think they're allowed to need a little more time to, warm up or whatever. So like the Foo Fighters guys, like they were chill. And I walked in, first of all, in awe, not because I was meeting the Foo Fighters, but because they were in the Red Sox locker room at Fenway Park. And I walked in and I was like, guys, thank you so much. This is the only time I have ever going to get into the locker room of the Red Sox at Fenway Park. This is a dream for a diehard, lifelong Red Sox fan. And it's almost like they were taken aback by that because I wasn't nerding out that the Foo Fighters were in the room. I was nerded out by the room. And they thought that was really funny and kind of like, oh, okay, like, we get it. Fenway Park is more famous than the Foo Fighters.
Of course.
So it was like, I walked in and I was like, oh my God, I'm in the Red Sox dressing room. And then I sat down and Dave let me sit on the stool that, like the little scooter that he was using to get around with his leg.
That. Yeah.
And they were just totally nice. They were pleasant and sweet. And
so Dave, my point was with Dave is that he wants to be where he's at.
Yeah.
And do you think he wants to be normal?
I think there's a certain amount of them that wants to be normal. Like I always attribute it to that brilliant SNL sketch with, oh my God, why is his name escaping me? And speaking of, Paul McCartney was on it and he was like, remember when you were in the Beatles?
Oh yeah, that's Farley.
Yeah, Chris Farley. Like, I think
so that was like just like the thing with
get old.
No, that was just like the thing with Rick Rubin is like, he was like a version of Chris Farley. You remember when you were in the Beatles? And it's like, yeah.
That was awesome.
It's like, that's it.
But I've heard from people that like Dave Grohl will like be backstage at shows barbecuing for the crew.
I can see that.
And so I think that there's a certain amount, like maybe not just exposed to like the hyper super Foo Fighters fans because they're going to get that Farley like, oh my God, you're Dave Grohl. This is so cool. But I think there's a certain amount that like it's got to get old to just have people kissing your ass all the time. That you want to be around people that you can have a conversation with, that you can talk about everyday things with and just kind of it's got to be exhausting to have to be on your guard all the time, especially in the era we live in now where everyone's got a camera phone on you 24 hours a day. And it's like you've got to be careful about what you say around people. And it's like you're constantly being observed. It's got to feel like you're in a zoo, even though it's a really big zoo.
Yep, I agree. I get that part. I think that, he's around his crew and they're like family.
Right.
So.
And the other bands on the tours that they just become friendly.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's a relating thing that he's not going to be able to have the same kind of conversation with a fan that he could have with you.
Yeah.
Because you're part of the circus as we all are.
And like, you see like the docu-series that he did with his mom From Cradle to Stage, like talking about the upbringing and talking to other artists and their moms. It's like that to me showed that you're trying to show the non-fame part, the upbringing, like where you came from. That's a great series if you haven't seen it. I found that fascinating.
I'll check it out.
Yeah. His mom wrote this book talking about like what it was like from the mother's perspective of raising someone that becomes this uber famous artist and went on tour with the Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl told the story that she went on tour with them and they were like backstage at a show and she was like hanging out with Billy Joe Armstrong and she was like, why isn't your mom on the road? Like she didn't understand why all the other moms weren't out there because she was out with the Foo Fighters. And so she started interviewing other artists' moms. So she interviewed Amy Winehouse's mom and like Dan Reynolds from Imagine Dragons' mom and Pharrell Williams' mom and like all of these other moms. And then they made a docu-series where they sat the person and the mom down with Dave Grohl and his mom.
Wow.
And it gives you this, it's really interesting because it gives you this different perspective on, because like, look, nobody is going to look at you more normal than your own mom. Like you don't, even Sir Paul McCartney, if he were in a room with his mom, if she were still alive, he ain't a fucking Beatle to his mom.
Right. There's two Paul McCartneys.
Yeah.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Now that's got to take some guts for certain people to get up there and do an interview like that with their moms. Like, okay,
yeah,
what's with this quack? What's with this stupid game face stuff and the way you're acting? What the hell are you doing?
I interviewed my mom on the radio years ago and got her to admit that she smoked pot.
That's funny.
And the whole time I had her live on the radio in front of the microphone, I was scared shitless that she was going to say something that I didn't want her to say.
Did did your finger on the dump button.
The dump button only dumps 7 seconds. If you know how a mom can be, you're not going to, unless you turn the mic off totally.
God.
But I love that audio because I was so excited to finally get my mom to admit that when she was younger, she smoked pot. I was like, yes.
A lot?
Not a lot, but like it was around. It was like, the late 60s, early 70s. I was like, Mom, I know there's no way you avoided pot. Can you just say that you smoked pot and just admit it? I'm like literally in my 20s. Like, you did a good job raising me. I'm not going to end up in jail because you smoked pot in the 60s. You just say it out loud. And she did. I was like, I felt like I won a prize. I was like, yes.
Did you tell your sister?
She knows.
She knows.
Oh, yeah, she knows. And of course, everyone that knew me and my mom was listening to the radio at the time, and they were like texting me, like, I can't believe she just said that. It was funny. So what are you working on next? What's on the docket? What's coming up in 2022, which is, depending on COVID, predicted to be the busiest touring year in history. And with all of these artists with so much downtime, which is uncharacteristic for their lifestyle, to be able to sit around and write, we've got to be like barely holding a dam back of like an unbelievable year in music.
Well, I kind of felt like that's what was happening during COVID. There was a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Back then. So like I worked with Corey, with Jay Rustin during that. What do we do? I think we did and we did an Avatar record too.
Yep.
But what's going on now?
Yeah. What are you working on?
I am working on 2 Clutch records.
Ooh.
One of them is called Doom Saloon 4, which is a series of live recordings in their place that they've got. And then they're doing a new record, and I can't tell you the name of the record.
I don't want to get you in trouble.
Neither do I.
I have one of those, the Corey Taylor CMFT. He sent me like a thank you plaque thing, and it has the little like wrestling belt.
Nice.
And it's hanging over there in the studio. It was like,
and you're friends with Corey too, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I've known him a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a powerhouse, that guy.
I always joke that about the biggest whores in rock and roll, and I don't mean whore in like a derogatory way, but like there are just certain artists that just kind of seem to be everywhere and working with everyone. And Dave Grohl and Corey Taylor are like the biggest whores in rock and roll. Like you can't turn around without them collaborating with someone, working with someone. They're just everywhere and amazingly talented.
I view them as being, is constantly pushing.
Yeah.
That's how I think about it. I don't think about them as being whores, but the, Corey he just goes and he goes and he doesn't stop, and he's got to do, he pushes really hard, and it's impressive. I work with a bunch of people that are like that. There's Darren Leader, Styx.
Oh my God.
I'm doing a record with him.
Really?
Mm-hmm. We're about halfway done.
Interesting.
Mastering. This is all mastering stuff. And Darren is he's super talented, but after getting to know him, working on this thing directly, we've talked quite a bit more than we did. I've done a ton of Steel Panther records. I don't know if you know that.
Yep.
Jay Rustin again. Big up to Jay Rustin, because we've done so much good stuff together. But so Darren is actually doing this whole thing by himself, and he's bringing other people in. So he's engineering, he's doing all the writing, playing for the most part, and engineering and mixing all himself, which is nuts. And he's really, really good at it. And he's got friends. He's got lots of friends, and he's bringing people in, guesting here and there on the record. So there's lots of good stuff there. But
I told our mutual friend Sean Cochran that he should have gone for the bass playing gig in Steel Panther.
That would be interesting.
I don't know if he wants to wear spandex, but I as soon as I saw that Lexi Fox was leaving and they were going to go on the hunt for a bass player, I sent it to him. I was like, "No balls, you need to do this."
That's interesting. That's crazy. But so Darren is, he's super hard driving, like Corey. But he's not doing tons of projects, but his work ethic is just phenomenal. Like we'd be working on something, and he's sending me stuff in advance of it being done because he didn't really have. He wanted to bounce stuff off of me for whatever reason. We didn't do that with Panther, but he's doing it on this, and so I'd make it. I'm making suggestions on stuff, and he's some of it he's doing. And he's not taking the easy road out on stuff. When you work with guys like this that are so super hardworking, it impresses me. I've seen lots of stuff in this, and I'm absolutely impressed with this guy. And I'll say, hey, why don't you make this song sound? I think this needs to be a little harder or something. And he didn't take the easy way out. He just he replayed it. He's like, that's a great idea. And he's like, I replayed the whole thing, and that's like, all I wanted you to do was just, do something in the mix and make it hit harder or something. He's like, no, he's like, and then I did the vocals over too. It's like, shit.
Did you
who
sleep?
does that? Huh?
Did you sleep?
He's fast and he's amazing. And he's doing some collaborations. He actually did a collaboration with Crowbot.
Oh.
Oh God! I think it's called "Everybody Dies" or something.
Yeah.
Have you heard it?
No.
You should check it out.
I like that band a lot.
I like them too.
Yeah, they're
I've
really good.
Done a couple records with them, but
I'm fascinated with artists. Like we'll use Corey as an example, right? So Corey's the same guy that CMFT has got this 80s kind of vibe to it because Corey's such a music lover.
Yeah.
And then Stone Sour kind of has its own aesthetic, and then Slipknot. And it's like it all comes out of the same person. It's amazing to me that there's kind of these different musical channels going on in their head. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm making a Slipknot record. Click, click. All right, I'm going to go do that. But then I've got these ideas that don't fit with Slipknot, so I'm just going to kind of put them over here. And then, I'm going to make a solo record. Click, click. Okay, I'm going to do that now. It's just fascinating to me that you can have so many different styles and voices as one artist.
You can, but I think that people, I've seen people, they'll go through stuff and they'll say, okay, well, maybe this is a solo song. You're like, maybe Corey knows exactly what he's doing. I wouldn't be surprised if he knows, everything is purpose built. But I know people that just kind of go, let the creative process take them on a journey, and then okay, maybe this is a band song. Maybe this isn't. This other one isn't a band song. They won't know until they get done with it. And I think that it's better to follow let the creative process take you on a journey, and then you figure out, be inspired by what you're doing, and then you figure out what it is after that, rather than making something purpose built.
Like Jerry Cantrell told me that the songs take shape based on who he's working with. So he could have a riff idea that he's kind of got put away or whatever, but if he's writing with Alice,
mm-hmm.
that riff and that song could kind of go in one direction. Whereas if it's a riff or something that he's collaborating with another artist or working on a solo record, because I asked him, I'm like, well, how do you decide, is this an Alice track or a solo track or whatever? How do you decide that? And he said that a lot of the ideas come from the same place, but they end up going where they're going because of the people he's writing them and recording them with. I thought that was interesting.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Corey did stuff too. You can tell Corey's such a huge fan because he just keeps he sticks these little things that are homages to other songs in his songs. He's like, oh my God, how the hell are you going to be able to pull this off?
I had him in the studio once, and I had 20 different clips of 20 different hair metal songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I quizzed him live.
Oh God.
And he got every fucking one right.
Of course he did.
He's an encyclopedia. It's unbelievable. He is musically very, very, very smart.
Oh, yeah.
And so dropping those homages in for the music that he loves, I can totally see that, what you're talking about.
Yeah. But then you're like, how is this going to get clear? How are you clearing this? Me coming from the hip hop world where it was like, oh my God, we're going to get sued.
Oh, it's all samples and borrowing from places. Yeah.
Or whatever,
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're going to be really busy this year.
I'm busy. Well, those are the things, I don't know what's coming up, but I'm in the middle of those things. We're doing another Corey record. Where are we at with this one? We're done with it. We just finished another Corey record. Can't tell you what it is. He'll tell you what it is.
Yeah, I'll find out from him. We got to get the Slipknot record first.
Right.
Which is near completion from what I hear, if it's not done already.
Nice. I'm doing a Bowling for Soup record.
Interesting.
Right, I do a lot of stuff with them. I know it's not metal and you only like talking about metal, so.
No, not at all.
Oh yeah, come on.
Not at all.
I saved all the non-metal stuff. There's another one. Just kidding. There's another one that's you'll never know this guy's name. David Holmes. He's part of this production trio with Keefus and Jade, and they're called Unloved. And
interesting.
A friend of mine, Michael Patterson, does a lot of work with them, and he brought me in for mastering to work on David's new record. But David and Keefus and Jade did Killing Eve, the TV show. Did you ever watch that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, imagine like I got to work on that, hear all that stuff, and then it's like, oh, this is cool. And then I see the TV show. I'm like, this is a really cool TV show.
Yeah.
And it made me like it even more. And then you're watching a scene and I did that. It's just funny.
It is interesting how much, especially rock artists, when you look at, what's going on with like Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross right now working in film. It's like, it's a whole other career now.
Yeah.
It's like Trent Reznor was pretty successful in 9 Inch Nails, and now he's got a couple Oscars and Grammys, and
that's what my buddy Michael's doing, that stuff too. Patterson. He works with Trent.
Yeah, it's like he just needs a Tony Award and he'll be an EGOT. I don't know how 9 Inch Nails is going to get a Tony, but I want to see it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. But when you go and watch those movies, to go back to what we were talking about, when it the score, the soundtrack, like it totally changes the viewing experience of a movie. And when you watch those movies and you can hear that and you're like, oh, wow.
Well, here's another thing. Sound, I think, is way more important and underrated than people think it is.
Yeah.
And that is because we hear what is it? We hear about 10 octaves of sound frequencies, right?
Yeah.
Visual stuff, 1 octave.
Interesting.
Think about that.
Ew.
So all the stuff with sound. When you have you ever seen a movie before it had any sound or anything on it?
Well,
like in production. Have you been around anything like that?
No.
So I have. So it's really weird, and you don't see it the same way at all, because you're just watching this stuff, and maybe there's a little bit of dubbing and stuff in there, or whatever, but there's no music. The music just heightens everything up all the time, and it's a huge deal. And it really the music is the emotional undercurrent of everything that's going on.
It's the soul of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why I liked soundtracks growing up. Still do. If a movie has a really good soundtrack, I'm like, it could be a halfway crap movie.
Bernadette! I can't stop it. That's what I'm going to take from Don't Look Up. the Four Tops. It's stuck.
There you go.
Yeah. I want to know what was on your card that I didn't ask you about. Mister, you did show prep, which I don't think prep. Nobody else that I've talked to has done show prep.
I don't see. The thing is that mastering engineers don't do interviews like this.
That's why I wanted to talk to you.
I know, but you'd want to talk to me because you know me, though, too.
No, when I started this podcast, it's a rock lifestyle podcast, and I didn't just want it to be, I'm just going to talk to rock stars, because sitting in the chair that I sit in, I've been fortunate enough to kind of see that it's not just the band on the stage that is part of this whole machine, this whole business. So when I talked to my friend Karen Durkot, she talked about how a record label gets a song from an artist and the PR plan that they put in, and how it is that they plot out these promotions in different cities and how they would select what radio stations could get involved with the band at certain times. And it's a whole part of the industry that nobody really talked about. And then when I talked to Toby Wright, and he talked to me about the process of being in the studio and producing Jar of Flies, and how Jerry Cantrell walked into that studio and that they had 10 days. And when they walked in, they had no song ideas. And in 10 days, they walked out with Jar of Flies. And what that process, it doesn't make any sense. And so it's like, I just know Jar of Flies, right? I know the record because I heard it on the radio. I bought it. I've seen the band play it live. But hearing what happened in the making of it.
So that's amazing that, you go in and it's like you put money down to rent a space for X number of days, and then you got to do something.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But that's what happens all the time.
Yeah. So it's not that far of a stretch to talk to a mastering engineer who, as you've been talking about, works with a wide range of artists.
Yeah.
But that you're using this same skill set to be the finishing, like your hands are the last hands on it before I get to hear it, before it's on the radio on my part of the machine.
I like that I get the final word on stuff. That kind of bummed me out a little bit when I was mixing and producing, because it would after I would get done with it, I was like, oh, I really like this. And then sometimes it would go off to get mastered and it didn't come out to my liking.
Miles Kennedy said that they sent a record off to get mastered and it came back and the soul of it had been taken away, that it had been like perfected and smoothed out and it didn't have any raw edges anymore, and it totally changed. So when I did that interview with him and he talked about the mastering process, I was like, I got to talk to Paul. I got to get him on the show, because you are that guy.
I am that guy. And the thing that you just said before that about my goal is to I don't let anybody down. And everything else that I have to do off to the side is that I don't want to be the guy that makes it so like, I can never listen. I can't listen to this record ever again. Like you loved it up until you got done making it and then it gets mastered and you're like, oh, this is shit.
Yeah.
Like, cause it's happened to me before and it sucks. So that's part of my thing. And I try to have special relationship with the mixers or the artists to make sure that they're getting what they want.
Wait, you've had it happen that you didn't do a good job and that it came back and it wasn't right?
Say what?
You said, I've had that happen to me before.
As an engineer, as a mixer.
Oh, okay.
Where it would, because the artist was whoever, and it was out of my control. I wasn't even I didn't even have a vote who was going to be mastering it.
Gotcha.
So that stuff has happened, but so I want to make sure everybody's happy. But I was going to tell you, if you asked this about some of, one of the things that's really interesting from my perspective is I'm doing so many projects a year that I get to, and I get to work with different levels of people or different areas of people that I never got to work with as much before. and it's right at the very end, right before it goes out. So I get to talk with the managers and the label people and stuff like that, and I'm seeing and learning what's happening from some of the best people in the industry.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely fascinating to see how everybody's navigating, the lockdowns, but, navigating the online stuff, the business and everything else, and seeing how well and how they're adapting to everything. And it's fascinating. And I wanted to give a shout out to a couple of people, which, these guys, the Capellinis, George Jr. and
George,
Senior.
Yeah.
So
the
like
Georges.
The
Georges.
Yeah. So they, you saw the thing on the book thing with this gold record set that they sent.
Yeah.
It's Pop Evil for, three gold singles. One's Trenches, another's Footsteps and Torn to Pieces. And, it's a giant statement. Lee's another one of these guys that's in the category of Corey.
Yeah, never stopping.
Never stops, works. I mean, all these guys are working their asses off, and the Capellinis are, Senior has a big legacy in the in the music business, radio world, and all that stuff. And so all these people are so good at what they do, and I was blown away that they sent me this thing. It was just ridiculously amazing and gorgeous looking. But, so I'm around all these people that are phenomenal, and like them, Vaughn and Kenny. You know who I'm talking about?
No.
Vaughn Lewis.
I don't think
that's Rob's manager.
Oh, okay.
Mike Ligori at Roadrunner Records.
Yep.
Mike Monterulo, Stefan Koster from Weathermaker. That's Clutch's label.
Yep.
Monty Connor. He used to run.
I don't know if I know Monty.
Oh, you have to know Monty. So there's just so many people that are. I'm surrounded by so many amazing people, and it's jaw dropping to see them do what they do so well.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I think, when you look at the evolution of a song or a record, right? You go from a guy like Corey sitting around, Paul McCartney, get back, like just sitting in a room with a guitar, just hashing it out. And then it goes through the other band members, and then you get in the studio and you're dealing with the engineer and the producer, and you're recording it, and it gets mixed. And then there's all this evolution, and then it goes from you, like if we're passing a hot potato, right? It goes to you and it gets finished, and then it goes to management and the label, and they kind of hash it out and figure out, is this the single? We put the marketing plan together, and then that hot potato gets handed to me. Right. I don't get any effect over the song or what it sounds like, but then I get handed it, and it like gets handed off to the fans. Like we all have this kind of part in the evolution of it. And so I think telling the story of each individual step of the songs that we love is interesting.
I agree.
Because I don't think a lot of people that just turn the radio on and hear a song understand what it takes for that song to go from Corey's head to their radio. It's a lot of steps in between.
It's deceptively simple.
Yeah.
Looking.
Yes.
Right. But, the best part, though, is for people to, they should like it on base value, though. They shouldn't like it because everybody spent a really long time making it.
No. But that it made it all the way through. Like, to go back to what Daughtry said, for an artist to have a vision of what they want their art to be, and to be able to navigate that channel, and to have the end product be the best version of the artist's vision and the dream of what the artist had. You know, it's like it's your job to make it better, not to fuck it up. That's what you were saying. Like, you don't want to let people down. You want to be able to give them the best version of what it is that they are trying to say.
Right.
But at any time, the car could go careening off out of control off the highway and end up in a ditch somewhere. Like, that is possible.
It is.
So you have to be, so you got to be good at what you do to keep the car on the road, basically, to dumb it down.
Well, you get the people, surround yourself with people that you feel comfortable are going to execute things to your satisfaction. And, you know, you need to surround yourself with great people. And then sometimes that helps people feel more comfortable and accomplishing what they want.
Yeah. We all have our part to play in a weird way.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's why I take advantage of my friendships with people that I like and go, you need to come on my show and let me pick your brain for a while.
Well, I hope this was worth it.
Yeah, of course it was.
I mean, I'm honored to be to do
I know
this
you don't think you're interesting, but you are.
Well, thank you. Oh,
and it was good to see you.
It's good to see you.
It's been weird, like being kind of locked away. I mean, people like you and I are used to kind of spending a lot of alone time in a padded room by ourselves. Like it's kind of pretty normal. Like the thing that makes us not crazy is that we actually have something to do in that padded room.
Well, the funny thing with the lockdown is that I didn't have a problem with it. It was actually better for me.
Really?
Than it was for, oh yeah. I'm sorry if it wasn't for you or for anybody that's listening. Seriously. But think about, so, I'm a hermit.
Right.
I can go out and I can do things, but, somebody says, you need to stay home or you need to stay in your studio and stay there. I'm like, really? I can stay home and just work like I normally do. Like, oh, this is great. And then your wife's going to be there with you too. Like, oh, this is even better because I don't get to spend enough time with her.
Right.
And then you can play with your toys, with all your equipment. And then it's like, well, your wife has to stay home and we need to do the radio show from home. I'm like, cool. I'll build a radio studio.
I was just going to say, like, okay, another studio. Here we go.
Sitting right here in the room. I'll take a picture of it and send it to you. But that's, it was such a, it was a giant challenge for me to make all this stuff work from here.
Yeah.
And I could have taken the easy way out. They're like, do you want us to send you a kit? And I'm like, nah, I'll build something.
I got this, bro.
I got it. And so, like me being a radio fan, and I've been a radio fan since I was a little kid. I got to help my wife run a radio. I ran a major radio station out of my house.
Yeah.
Out of my house. There was a few million people listening to if I did something good or if I screwed up. A few million people heard it like that. So it was really, really incredible experience for me. And I was thinking, so I was busy as hell during the whole thing and doing that. I did mastering in the daytime and did radio at night every day. I was able to go out and just buy tons and tons of stuff because we could, and just pack the house full of stuff. I guess we're going to have dinner at home again tonight. This is no big, like, who cares?
It was weird for me to like when it all started, like when I finally built MCHQ and made it so that I could do radio shows from here, that I could record and edit the podcast here, that I could just do it all from here. I found so many more hours in the day. Like I knew how much time I spent in the car, but until you gain 3 extra hours of your day by not commuting, I would get all my work done, work late, work a couple extra hours and be like.
Driving around wastes a lot of time.
Yeah. And I used to make it as productive as I could and be on the phone and stuff, but it's not as productive as I can be sitting in a studio.
Right. So, on the one hand, it was awful what happened to AAF, but that was right just before, when was that?
2 weeks before COVID hit.
Right. So you would have, COVID, if it would have stayed open, you would have been home anyway.
I'm hoping,
you know what I mean?
Based on the interviews that I had, that I could have gotten back on the radio fairly quickly, but COVID put the kibosh on all that. Like,
well,
they stopped hiring, and but I would have been alone in my isolation. Yeah,
you would have been home no matter what.
Yes.
So, it's you built a studio for yourself, and that's fantastic. And it's whether they would have made you stay home for as long as we were made to, I don't know, but we were out for a year.
Yeah.
So
I was hoping to be able to get right back on the radio again. Like, that was my goal. I went on job interviews and I was like, okay, I got severance. I was smart with my contract negotiations. Like, I'm going to be okay. And then, I went on some interviews that were really great. And I was like, okay, might be a few months or whatever, but I'm going to end up back on the radio and back in a studio in a radio station like normal. And it won't be the same station, but I thought my life was just going to go back to quote unquote normal, meaning I would just be at another radio station, but driving to work every day, working in a studio or whatever. And then when COVID hit, it was like, oh, hiring freeze, nobody's doing anything, like the industry's changing, what's going to happen? So that's why I was like, well, no matter what I do, if I end up reading audiobooks, if I end up producing other people's podcasts, if I end up doing radio, if I end up doing my own podcast, whatever I end up doing, voice acting, whatever, I need a place to do it. Well, I can't do any of it without a studio. So I built a studio.
As you should have always had one, though. But
I know.
And then you, but you got married.
I did. In the middle, who doesn't get married in the middle of a lockdown?
Congratulations again.
Thank you. It was one of those things where it was like, because he's in the military and knew he was, here's the 1, 2, 3 punch. Are you ready?
Yep.
AAF goes off the air. I was already on my way to Vegas to a rock radio convention that was already paid for. So they were like, go. So I get business cards printed because now I need a gig, right? So
I remember this.
So my boyfriend goes, well, I'll meet you in Vegas. I'll take a few days off. I'll come meet you in Vegas because he doesn't live here with me because he's in the military. So he's stationed on a base somewhere else in the country. He's like, I'll meet you in Vegas. I go, okay. He lands 20 minutes after I do in Vegas. I'm at baggage claim waiting for him. He texts me, you turn your phone on when you're taxiing, and he's like, I just landed. And then he got an email and he's like, so I just found out I'm deploying. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I leave in September for a year. And I was like, what?
God.
Yeah, this is pre-COVID. I mean, COVID was a thing, but it wasn't a thing. This is the end of February. It's the last week of February in 2020. So now I've lost my job. And a few days later, I found out that my boyfriend is getting ready to deploy for the 3rd time since he and I had been together. And then a week and a half later, COVID hits. And so it was like, boom, boom, boom. I was in a prize fight getting my ass kicked.
Happens in threes. That's what they always say.
Yeah. And so through the course of building the studio, the lockdown, trying to figure out what my career was going to do, preparing for him to deploy, the conversation came up about like, well, we're going to end up getting married eventually. Like, do we want to do it before I go, or do we want to do it like when I get home? But I mean, we know we're going to end up getting married.
You got married before he deployed.
Yes.
Oh God, that's amazing.
Yeah. So it was like, we talked about it and whatever. And it was like, well, what do you think? And then finally, because you know me, Captain Subtle over here. And I was like, well, if you want to get married, buy me a ring and ask me for real.
Nice.
So he did, the fucker.
Good on him.
with skulls on it.
Wow, that looks great.
And so then it was like, okay, well, you just proposed and you're leaving in 10 days. Or no, you're like, yeah, you're getting ready to leave like in a month and you just proposed. So like, when are we getting married? And it was like next weekend in the middle of a pandemic. So then it was like, I guess I gotta find a dress. Like, it was easy for him because he wore his uniform, but like I had to find a dress and we had to figure out how we were going to get married in a pandemic.
You got married in Vegas or
no, we got
home?
married at home.
Okay.
We got married at home. We invited, as many friends and family as we could. Everybody stayed in pods they brought lawn chairs because we got married outside because of COVID. And so everybody had their little bubbles of the family that they were with, and everybody stayed amongst themselves. And we ordered a bunch of pizza and had like bottles of champagne, and all the little pods in the yard got pizza and beer and champagne. And we got married outside. I called in a favor to get a photographer, and my cousin's daughter did my makeup, and my hairdresser cleared her schedule, and we just put it together and got married on 9 days' notice.
And what day was this?
August 29th. Yeah.
So we were deep in COVID land.
Oh, we were neck deep in it. Yeah. It was like the worst possible time to try and get married. And I was like, oh God, please don't let my wedding be a super spreader event. Like, please don't have somebody, but we were really careful. We were super, super careful, and we had people that watched from their cars, like family members that were immunocompromised, that we got married so that they could watch from cars the way that they were parked, so that they could be safe, but they could be there with us. And nobody got exposed. Nobody got sick. And then within a month, he was gone. And he's been gone ever since. So he's been gone this whole time. He's still not home.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's still gone.
Oh my God.
So I've been able to see him for a total of 9 days since he left at the end of September last year. So 2020. He's been gone since September of 2020.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
you were a tough cookie.
So when you talk about like being able to be home and like work with your wife in the house, I'm like,
I'm sorry.
I don't even know what that means.
I didn't mean to upset you.
No, that's not upsetting at all. Like, I understand when you have jobs that keep you apart and then you finally get the opportunity to be around each other. It's like, why wouldn't you be excited about that? I look forward to that someday.
Yeah. So,
But I knew what I was getting into. I married a person in the military. Like, you know that's what you're going to get.
You guys will get to spend time together, and you'll have, it's coming for you. That's great. It's a great thing to look forward to. And I'm glad that you were able to get them married when you did. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was nice. And I mean, I think every relationship, that you can stress about, we need to get napkins printed for the wedding. And like, you can get wrapped up in the wedding as opposed to the marriage.
Right. You prioritize things differently when.
Yeah. And I know that 20 years from now, like, we're going to talk about the crazy wedding in the middle of the pandemic that we had. And like, not everybody was there, was able to be there, but we know that, when he gets home from the deployment, like, we'll do like a welcome home party when it's safe to do that and people can see him, and like,
right.
It just,
so for you guys, it's like it's for us, it's the opposite. So like, we just usually don't get to spend any time together ever. Yeah.
So for you guys, it's,
and then I got to spend a year with my wife that I didn't think was going to happen until we would retire.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Well, and it's also amazing, and you've been in the business long enough, that technological advancements, when you and your wife started in your respective careers, it wouldn't have been technically possible for you to do a radio show for millions of people out of your house. Like technology has made us able to do what we do in spite of the COVID restrictions.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's been amazing that I can be on the radio every day from my own studio around the country.
So you're doing your show from your studio now?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's like, it's awesome. I love having my own studio. You'll appreciate this. I can leave my favorite pen.
And it's still there when you come back tomorrow.
My cell phone charger's still there. There's no dirty cups. There's no like cigarette ashes or like, you know, my studio is exactly set up the way that I like it. Everything is where I left it. Like, I understand why people like Howard Stern got to a level and they're like, I want my own studio. I get it now. I used to think it was so pompous. Like, I don't need my own studio. I work at a radio station. I want to work in the studio everyone else works at. And now I'm like, this is kind of nice. Does that make me a terrible person? I like having my own workspace. It's nice.
That's, you know, same thing here. I still like going off to the mastering studio in another location.
Yeah.
But I like having this setup here. We've had a setup of sorts over the years so that she can record something when we need to. But now it's since we had to make this, it's permanently going to be here.
Yeah.
So we can, you know, we actually think we had to get back on do a remote for a week. I forget why. Oh no, it was because something I'll tell you about later. So we had to do so we had to work from home for about a week or so, and then they're like, do you still have everything? Do you remember how to whatever? I'm like yeah, and we like got everything fired up, and I tell you, everything worked perfectly. It took me months to get this thing dialed in. But
it's like being a mechanic, right? You work in a garage, and it's the same thing as working in a garage and having a community set of tools, or working in a garage where you have your own personal set of tools that are organized the way you want them to be. They're the tools you like, the brand you like. They are taken care of the way that you like, organized the way that you like, and you go in every day and your tools are exactly the way that you left them. It's like, who doesn't want that? There's nothing more frustrating than working on a community set of tools and then some asshole leaves a screwdriver someplace and you can't find it.
Right. You know, it was this. You've experienced this all your life because you're on radio, but for me, one of the coolest things was when I was dialing in the sound for this thing, we would do a break, and then I would shut the speakers off, the main ones here, and then I would flip the radio on, and because we're on like a 20-second delay, and I could hear exactly what we did live coming through the thing, and I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, I do
and then
that
I would just
too.
like reach over and make a little adjustment and everything, and get her sound dialed in. I was like, oh, this is so freaking amazing.
Yeah, because it does work on that little bit of a delay. So it's like, oh, wait. It is weird hearing yourself on the radio. It's weird.
Yeah.
That is strange. Like, wait, that's what I do? Like, that's weird.
That's what you do.
It is weird. And I always go back and listen to the podcast episodes too, because like one of the things that I do with every podcast episode is I make a corresponding playlist. So I make a playlist that has all the songs that we talked about and all the artists that we talked about, so that when we're referencing music that people might not be familiar with, they know that if they click on the playlist, it's all right there for them to make it easy for them to discover new artists or songs they may not have heard before or whatever. So when I go back and listen to this episode and produce this episode, I'll be building the playlist as we go.
Nice.
So as I'm producing it, I'll be clicking and dragging songs around to make a playlist of all of the stuff that we talked about and the artists we talked about. And it is weird to go back and listen to it and produce it, because I'm like, sometimes I forget that it's me, and then I'm like, oh, that is me. And nobody's a harsher critic of your work than yourself.
Of course.
You know? And then you're like, why did you ask that question? Or why didn't you follow up with this question?
Or why am I saying what I'm saying now?
Yeah, like I get mad at myself sometimes, and like, but I love hearing an answer to a question or asking a question and getting a response that was like unexpected, and then getting feedback from the audience because they thought it was interesting too. That it wasn't just me that thought it was interesting, that all of a sudden they're like, I'm so glad you asked that question because I always wondered that. Like I had my friend Frank Scambolone on. There's another example of in the evolutionary chain of the songs. He's a front of house engineer.
Okay.
He mixes live sound. And he was like, why do you want me on the show? And I was like, because everyone sees you at shows and they don't know what you do.
It makes it sound good.
Yeah, but we don't understand exactly what and how it all works and why there needs to be, you know how many music fans don't understand why why a monitor guy even has a job? Because they don't understand, like you're on the stage with the other musicians. Why do you need a guy to make it like you're on the stage? Why can't, and he explained that whole thing. And I got so much feedback from people that were like, I'm so glad that you asked him the questions you asked because I've always wondered that going to shows. You and I take for granted that everybody knows what all these people do.
Right.
But the average person, the average music fan, it's not that they're stupid. They just, how would they know? Nobody explained it to them. They pay their ticket. They go to watch the show. They see all these people running around in black, ornery, you know, or they download an album or whatever, but they don't know the same way that like, I don't know what the role of every single person in a surgical room does during an operation.
Right.
So it's like, you know, I mean, that was one of the most trafficked episodes of the entire year. And he's not a rock star. I told him that and he was like, yeah.
I'm going to have to check it out.
But people are interested with that kind of stuff. And not only what it is that you do, but well, how do you even get a job like that?
Make good coffee.
Yeah, same thing with you. Like, how do you end up being like the last person in this line of hot potato with a song? How do you end up there? And now people know, you know, have a dad that's an engineer and a mom that's a music teacher. That's what happens.
Well, you know, what happened with me getting into mastering was that everybody started, there was a turning point where people started mastering their own stuff before I started mastering, and they would just think, oh, like, do you master? Like, I just kept getting calls and calls and calls. I'm like, shit, I should do that. There's like more calls coming in for that.
Well, you don't, the way this business is, you never say no. That's just a bad answer. Just, yes, of course I do that. Yes.
I did. I turned down, I remembered something like 25 jobs in the beginning. I was like working on, things were just kind of in a weird place. And I was working on a couple of indie projects or whatever. And then people started asking if I was mastering. I'm like, do you have any idea what mastering is? Why are you asking me to master this? I'm a mixing engineer. Don't you know?
Duh.
No, they didn't know. So
yeah. Well, if people are asking you to do a job, figure out how to do it.
I did.
That's the hustle.
That's exactly what I did.
That's why I built the studio, because I was like, well, you know, I know how to produce podcasts and edit audio. So if I can't get back on the radio, then I could do it for other people. I know how to do it.
People are making huge bucks doing that stuff.
Yeah. It is crazy, like how quickly podcasting has grown. And
it's everywhere. There's so much.
Yeah, but like I think up until the pandemic, I think there was a hurdle of technology, and there was a kind of I don't know what that is. And it's one of those things where it's like, wait, like my husband, he never listened to podcasts. And then I started one and he was like, well, I'm going to listen to it and see what it is. And, you know, whatever. Then all of a sudden he started finding all of these military podcasts and like marksmanship podcasts and like all of the stuff that he's really interested in. Mm-hmm. And now he listens to them all the time. And
that's great.
Yeah. So I think it's one of those things where it's like, it's kind of showing the radio industry that people are interested in the conversation part of it. Because I think radio got to the point where it was like, play the music. And it's like now all of a sudden the focus, which is a good thing for your wife and I, the focus goes back to now like, oh, you mean they cared about the person in between the songs too? Oh, what a novel concept. Whereas for a while you got treated like you were just this chimpanzee that just pushed buttons in the studio, that your skill set wasn't important. Stop talking so much, or don't do this or don't do that. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait, people can get music anywhere? You mean they listen for the host too?
Oh yeah.
What?
Of course.
Yeah.
For you and for Carol.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's part of the gig, but they don't they don't tell you that.
Who?
The bosses, the companies.
Of course not.
Yeah, exactly. And I learned that when I started the podcast, because it was an uncertainty thing. Where are people going to listen? Are they going to care about these conversations? Are they going to want to hear this stuff? And the answer is yes. I get feedback all the time. The podcast is in 130 countries now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's crazy. I don't know who the hell is listening in Australia, but you guys fucking rule, whoever you are. And in India and in Scotland and in Dubai and Brazil and all the other amazing, Croatia. I had to look up some of the countries. I didn't even know where they were.
I'm going to have some Vegemite when we're done.
So I had to.
Australia.
So Vegemite's Australian.
Australian, right?
And then Marmite is the English version, I guess.
Yeah, but I was thinking Vegemite when you said that.
Yeah, I had to ask Karen in the interview what the difference was because I didn't know. And Marmite.
Vegemite is what?
Vegemite is like the black stuff.
And Marmite is?
Marmite is like, I think it's like a yeast thing, or it's a post-World War thing that like poor people grew up eating. And see, that goes back to the Paul McCartney thing about being special. He's fucking a Beatle, and he still eats something that he ate as a kid, as a poor kid post-World War II, because he enjoys it.
He's from Liverpool.
Yeah. It's like, but these are like the rando things that, and the podcast has kind of taken a life of its own with these conversations. Half the time we don't even end up talking about the artist's music itself. We talk about who inspired them and where it came from and music that they love and growing up. And
well, so you're going to have to, we talked about this before. I think you hit the record button, but you got to have, you got to get Trupa to sponsor the show.
So Paul loves to try and have a Boston accent, and it's a valiant effort. And you think that I should get Iron Maiden's Trooper beer to sponsor my podcast, but I have to say it like the Mistress Carrie podcast sponsored by the Trooper.
No. I think I've got this other special microphone over here. I'm going to do this for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, do it.
Let me think about what was I supposed to say? This episode of Mistress Carrie is sponsored by Trupa. Trupa, party responsibly. Wait, is that Trupa for the true fan?
Yeah.
Okay, and we're back.
Yeah, and we're back. If my show gets to the point where I get to have an announcer, dude, I'm going to let you know. Be like, Paul, I need an announcer.
Trupa for the true fan.
And by the way, if Bruce Dickinson happens to be listening to this and he wants to advertise Trooper beer on the Mistress Carrie podcast, just let me know.
Come on, man.
Just let me know.
You got to.
Go to mistresscarrie.com.
The history with Trooper. I can't even say it. Trooper. I can't say it like that.
It's weird, right?
That's not right. But we have to do I won't go into the stories now, but with Sean when they came here.
Yeah.
And we talked with you, right? This was right after the thing with the station. But they remember when they came here and we got stuck in an elevator.
Oh yeah.
And the funny thing is that we're So we went to go see Nico
McBrain, yeah.
Yeah. So we were on our way to the show, and then what were we doing? We went to some place that had a really old crappy elevator in it. And keep in mind, so it was me and Sean and a bunch of other guys they're all firefighters and police officers
from New England. Yeah.
From New England. And they're like, oh, ha, ha, ha. And you know, they're jumping around and stuff in the elevator. And the elevator was packed with us, and that was it. And then it stops. And I was like, oh, this sucks. And this was also right at the beginning of just before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so everybody's going to get sick. And then we had to get rescued by New York's finest. How funny is that?
Well, first of all, you're stuck in an elevator with people that run into burning buildings and get shot at for a living. So they're not even weirded out by it.
No, they don't care at all.
They don't care
whatsoever. But they had to get rescued by my boys.
Right. And a Boston guy does not want to get rescued by a New York guy.
And I was like, they opened the door and I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, thank you, guys. And we took a picture out in front of the place in front of the fire truck.
That is so funny. Yeah, you don't want to get stuck in an elevator with anybody, especially a bunch of cops and firefighters.
What you don't want to get stuck in an elevator with is a bunch of guys from Boston, because all they're going to do is laugh. They can't do anything for you.
No.
You got to call the New York boys.
Yeah.
New York guys will get you out of it.
Boston people have 6 senses of humor. We find humor, very dark humor. Like, we're twisted people. That's why you love us, though. Admit it. It's why you like having friends from that part of the country, because we're fucking weird.
No. Well, my brother's from Boston too, you know. He lives in Boston. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
He works at Harvard.
Oh, he works at Harvard. Pardon me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We went to a game. My dad came up and we went to a game in Fenway.
Oh, you did?
Yep. He's like, let's go. He's like, let's go to see a baseball game, and we haven't done it in a long time.
You're a really tall guy. That park is not made for people like you.
It was an awesome game, but it was. They're like, are you uncomfortable? I'm like, no, not at all. Go Yanks!
I took Zach Wilde to a Sox-Yankees game years back, and he's an unapologetic Yankees fan.
That was the year that the Sox won.
Which year? There's been a few.
The year that broke the
2004.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good year.
It was a great year. I was happy for you guys.
We didn't get a lot of sleep that year. Between the ALCS when we beat the Yankees in 7 games and then the World Series, that was a couple of weeks where no one got any sleep. 2 of those games went after midnight against the Yankees. Like, we didn't get any rest at all.
That's okay. I mean, and you might think that I'm actually a Red Sox fan too. What I really am is I'm a Reds fan.
Ah, well, that makes sense. You got to dance with the date that brung you. You grow up there. That's the team you love. Doesn't matter where you live. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
If I lived anywhere else in the country, I would still be an annoying as shit Red Sox fan, because that's what I grew up cheering for.
It happens.
Same way I'm still a Pats fan, even though Tom Brady's gone. Like, I'm always going to be a Pats fan because that's what I grew up cheering for them when they couldn't win. It's just that the last 2 decades, it's been really fun being obnoxious. And now, not so much, but whatever.
And you said which one? That means I've actually stopped watching baseball. So you won more than one World Series recently?
Yeah. 2004, 2007, 2013, 2017, I think.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's been fun.
You guys are good.
We have been. Yeah, 4 World Series, 6 Super Bowls, a Stanley Cup championship, and an NBA championship in 20 years. That's a lot of duck boats in Boston. It was fun. Being on the radio at that time was a blast because it was like broadcasting from those parades, like just all of that kind of stuff. Like the city was amazing. Like having the Red Sox win the World Series after the marathon bombing. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. Like those are experiences that a city goes through together that it's just amazing. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
And that's why now being on the radio in a bunch of different places has been interesting for me too, because it's like, okay, well now I'm on the radio in places I've never been before.
So tell me what's going on with that, because I'm not completely up on.
So I work for Westwood One now.
Okay.
And so I am on a bunch of different stations around the country now in the afternoon. And it's been interesting and cool and exposing myself to a whole new audience and finding a new audience just with the podcast. Having my podcast get shared, like if I interview Lee Kakati from Pop Evil and then he posts the interview on his Twitter, and then all of a sudden all of these Pop Evil fans listen to my podcast because they're a fan of Pop Evil, and then they're like, oh, I wonder who else she's talked to. And then all of a sudden they start listening to my podcast, but they're not listening to me because of WAF. It's like all of a sudden now they just discovered the podcast on its own merits. And it's been interesting making a new fan base and having people discover me and my show outside of the job I used to have. That's a really big shadow to get out from behind.
Well, you're doing a great job with it.
Thanks. Trying. It hasn't been easy, but I'm figuring it out.
I knew you would figure it out. You were in that other category of people that just keeps going and keeps pushing.
Yeah.
And that's why you are you.
Yeah. I don't know how to be content. I don't know how to stop moving. It's like a shark. It's like if a shark stops swimming, it drowns. Like I don't know how to stop moving. It can be really
keep
annoying
pushing.
to be around a person like that, which I think is why the people in our industry, sometimes it takes them a few times to get married to the right person. Like it is an industry that attracts sharks, to use that analogy. And I think it can be hard to be in a relationship with someone if you're not necessarily like that yourself, that you don't understand. Or having two people that are like that can be hard too, because like you said, like you're managing these crazy lives trying to find time to be together.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's what you love and if it's what kind of feeds you, you have to do it. Like, what else am I going to do?
Play clarinet.
No, we know that's not what's going to happen. And there's no heavy metal clarinet. Like, if there's ever a clarinet part in an artist that you're working with, will you let me know? I think I could probably still play Let's Go Band if I tried really hard.
You could be an engineer.
No.
No?
No, I'm not smart enough.
You're engineering now.
Yeah. For a very dumbed down version of what you do every day.
No.
This one has pretty lights and no. I can do it with like interviews and stuff, but when it comes to, I talked to Toby Wright about that, like listening to different hertz and frequencies, different tones and trying to mix and I'm not smart like that to be able to do what you guys do.
Yeah, but that's not how I think about it. I don't do that.
Yeah, but you have that luxury to not think about it that way because you can do it.
I just want to listen to it and make it sound good and think about it like that, not get all geeked out on the stuff.
Yeah, but in order to get it to sound good, you have to geek out on it. I don't know how to go about going from this doesn't sound good to this does sound good. I don't know what's in the middle. My gift is I can tell, like I've been told I have good ears. So I've been told, like, if you give me a record that I can or give me a bunch of songs that I can kind of tell you which songs I think will be good singles or songs that I think would be successful. Like that, I think, is where my ability lies. If that is an ability, I think that's what I have. But I don't have the ability to kind of be involved with the creation of the song. Or the mixing of it or the mastering of it. But if you give me the songs, I can go, oh, well, this one I think is really good. And I've had bands do that. Go, can I send you some songs and can you kind of tell me which ones you like the best? Which is kind of cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
Have you ever uttered these words? That's a hit.
Maybe, probably at some point or another. Or it could be a hit. Because you and I both know that there are plenty of hit songs that never became hits because there was a failure along the way. It is possible to fuck up a hit song in bad promotion, bad management, bad label. Like, it is possible. The song is still a hit, but it never got to hit popularity status because it got screwed up along the way. So that is possible. There are bands out there that I think are fantastic that should be way bigger than they are, and it's been a failure of the machine around them that I think has failed them at one point or another in their career.
Mm.
You know, that there have been albums and songs that should have been way bigger than they were, but something went wrong along the way. It is possible, but I think that, you know, a good song is a good song, whether it's, you know, there's a difference between a good song and a hit. A hit is more of like the business knighting it, like, oh, you are good. Whereas,
do you remember? Yeah, do you remember Hit Predictor?
Yeah.
Did you hear? You know what that is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a computer algorithm, research driven. Like, is this going to be? I mean, I've seen things where they put headphones on 1,000 people and they play stuff and people vote on it, and that's gonna. But it's all the environment that a song gets released to. Like you,
I think, yeah, it's you're better off handing. Record companies would be better off talking to you because you play stuff and you have an active response from your audience. You have an active audience.
Yeah.
You know, when you were on AAF and you play stuff and you could do the thing that you do and you pick stuff out, and then you'd have a pretty good shot at hearing something and picking something that you wanted to play on your radio station. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, that's I don't think people understand what a big deal that is, to choose to do something on a live radio station when there's a lot of people listening to you.
Yeah. Because if you screw up,
you screw up in front of 3 million people.
Yeah.
And that's a big screw up.
You say something stupid, you know, whatever it is, it's like that. That's the kind of fun about radio, though, is that you're out there with your ass hanging out. That it's you know, when you're talking about live radio, you're out there with your ass hanging out. And there is a certain danger to that. There is a certain adrenaline rush to it where it's like you're flying by the seat of your pants. And it's not the same. Like with the podcast, it's different because I'm not looking at the clock going, oh, I got to get into commercials in 4 minutes, and I hope he doesn't swear, and you know, the record company guy's not standing there looking at me go, don't forget to plug the single or the record, or hey, make sure you mention that they're playing a show, or like the podcast, you can just go wherever it takes you, and that's a fun in its own right. But live radio in a room full of people staring at you, I see it with the bands. They come in, you get a rock star that's going to headline a 50,000 person show, and the lead singer's going to grab the mic and sing and do the whole thing and command that crowd. And you get them to sit down in a radio station and they put the headphones on and they don't know what to fucking say. And it's hilarious. And I've said that to them flat out, like, you know, in 5 hours you're getting on a stage in front of a bunch of people. And they're like, I know, but I'm just singing. Like, I wrote those songs. I can sing those songs. This is crazy because it's going to go, like, they don't know what I'm going to ask. They got to answer the questions off the cuff. There's an element of danger to it, and it's fun as hell.
It's you're on a. I felt it. I never quite understood what everything you described is about until I did the shows with my wife.
Yeah,
and it was like being on the radio station is a freight train, and it's going to keep going and going and going, and you better get it right or you're going to get kicked off, or there's going to be carnage.
Yeah. Jump in, jump off, and don't die.
And there might be carnage from if stuff doesn't fire right, if you screw things up, and then there's
mispronounce something, a piece of equipment doesn't work.
But there's sponsors that have paid tons of money.
Oh yeah.
To have spots and all this other stuff, and if a spot doesn't run, or if you say something wrong, or it's like, it's intense.
Yeah,
I have great respect for what you do and what my wife does, and I have a newfound respect for the whole thing after being able to participate in it.
And it used to be a lot harder. We're spoiled with the technology now. Like when I was learning in school, we were still editing with a grease pencil and a razor blade, cutting tape.
Yeah, that's how it started too.
And you were pushing buttons, firing every song and playing every commercial, whereas now a computer runs it. So like I started in the business when you had to be able to pee during a Green Day song, because when the song was over, if you weren't back in the studio to push the button.
Well, so you guys had Next Gen at your station?
Well, we started with Audio Vault, and then it went to Wide Orbit. All those automation systems are basically the same. They all kind of do the same thing. But when I started, we were putting CDs in jewel cases into the CD players and queuing up the songs, and it was, don't queue up the wrong track, or you better make sure that that's an edited version of the CD. Or records, playing records on the air. Yeah. I learned how to cue those up in college, the half a step back, and so it doesn't go brrr at the beginning. Yeah. And then they'd have this. I visited a radio station when I was early in the early days in Ohio, and they had this machine in the back of the room that was running the reels were going real slow. I'm like, what's that? It's like, it's recording everything that goes on for, each tape is 24 hours long, if you can believe that. Wow. So they would record, now it's all done digitally. Yeah, probably. It's all stored on you can't deny if you accidentally swore anymore, because they got it archived now. There's proof. Yeah. But it's fun. It's addictive. If you got into radio and you do radio, like radio people are our own kind of breed of people. Mm-hmm. So.
Trooper for the true fan.
I'm so glad you did this. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was so good to see you.
It's good to see you. Well, when are we going to talk again?
I don't know.
Another year?
No. It'll be before that.
We'll get let's do we'll talk. We'll talk. Let's schedule something so we can do one of your war room things, and we'll get Sean and a bunch of people and whatever. Rob.
You're just looking for an excuse to drink with us.
Yeah, I can't do it on this. I have to make sure that my first interview is going to be good.
It was
no
great.
Slurred words.
You did fine.
Thank you.
There he is, the one and only Paul Logus. Yep, I told you, buckle up. That was a long one, but so much fun. And he's had such an amazing and fascinating career. How can you not want to hear all of his stories? Now, if you want to know more about Paul Logus, you can check the links in the show notes of this episode. You can also find all of my links there and the link to the corresponding playlist. Every full-length episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast has a playlist with all of the music that we talked about in the episode. I want to make it easy for you. Huge thanks once again to our sponsor, Digital Federal Credit Union. You can find them online at dcu.org. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and follow the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday. Plus, every weekday, you get the Sit Rep. The Situation Report gives you all your music headlines, your rock news, and industry info in less than 5 minutes. And if you're looking for more Mistress Carrie in your life, well, just head to mistresscarrie.com. It's all right there. The Mistress Carrie podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.